In the future, an unknown organization locks millions of people in bunkers where they are forced to become bloggers and conduct endless streams to get everything they need to survive.
Why us? Who worry before all this?
A young man wakes up in the middle of a gloomy room, not understanding where he is and how he got there. At first, he examines the walls, hoping to find a way out, but there is none. Then the guy notices a turned-on monitor on which one word is written: share. He tries to enter different concepts related to the word exit, but the computer deems them incorrect and again offers to share. The guy confirms this command and the broadcast immediately turns on. The guy tries to ask questions as he can't stay here long. He has a dog at home that needs to be fed and walked, and besides, he wants to drink, but there's no water. He tries to ask this question to the computer and then an option buy appears, but the prisoner has no money and doesn't understand how he can buy water. Soon the guy realizes that real people are watching his broadcasts, but so far, he does not quite understand what he can show the viewers, so he starts to grimace, but falls and groans in pain, asking for help. The number of views sharply increases and viewers start sending donations of unknown currency with which any purchase can be made, but so far, he only has enough for a bowl of dog food which appears in an opening niche on the wall. He expresses his indignation and tries to return the bowl, but there is no such function. And then the guy starts eating, occasionally making dog barks. This brings a new wave of views and donations, and the guy allows himself to buy clothes. However, they turn out to be women's. At night, he cries in despair and misunderstanding of the situation, but pulling himself together, he starts a new broadcast, during which he dances, tumbles, and entertains the viewers in every way possible. Soon, he acquires a t-shirt and an inflatable mattress. After some time, he already has a full wardrobe and shaving tools. Days go by, and the man allows himself a good meal and even alcohol, after which he tries to smash the monitor, but all he achieves is that the broadcasts stop. The guy tries in every possible way to beg forgiveness from the computer, and not getting an answer, again demands to be released from there. And then he just cries, begging for one more chance, and when the degree of despair reaches its limit, the guy lies down on the floor to wait for the end. The monitor turns on. On the screen appears the same room in which a man is. He greets the guy and explains that there are glitches in the system, but in general, upon reaching a certain level, he gained access to the common network. And now he can communicate with others like him, bloggers. The man believes that they all work for the unknown kidnappers who locked them in the bunker. The man talks to the guy all evening about the structure of his new world. He is very verbose and often jumps to other topics, so the guy even gets tired of him. But one day he hears the man cough. He tries to contact him and dialing his channel number, he comes across a cook teaching the audience to cook. The guy starts dialing different numbers, and it turns out that behind each number is someone's channel. The trapped people teach viewers how to feed cats, apply makeup, and take care of themselves. One of these girls, an athlete, captivates the guy's attention for a long time. Eventually, he connects with a man who is broadcasting about near-death experiences that day. Meanwhile, the young man continues his acrobatic etudes, for which he receives small donations. After one such unsuccessful somersault, he lies on his mattress, and the adult man asks him to buy food, as his time is worth money. After the young man fulfills his request, the man draws attention to their numbers. The young man is under number 14, while the man is 6395873. Does the young man really think he appeared here before him? Everyone in the network is trying to figure out who locked them up here. There are theories about aliens and space, and one boy convinced everyone that they are asleep and undergoing a test. But the man believes that bloggers have locked themselves in their own world. He himself was once married to a star who the young man also liked. They reminisce about her songs and sing them as a duet. At night, the young man again connects to the channel of the girl who does yoga, and after admiring her, sends her a donation. In the morning, the young man buys furniture for himself and again talks to the man, who continues to enlighten him. You can't stay at one level here, because then the viewers will stop loving you and won't pay. So, you need to grow and spread your content. The young man begins to try himself in new genres. He tests stand-up comedy, physical exercises, cooking, singing, and magic tricks. And all this brings a new audience and more donations. At night, he now does gymnastics with the girl he likes, and then he buys medicine for the man. But trying to make the purchase, he makes some mistake and ends up in the room of a woman who is showering at that moment. She is outraged by such a bold intrusion and considers him a kidnapper. The young man struggles to explain that he is also a prisoner. She suggests setting rules, and the man joins their conversation. The woman asks him about the time he has spent in the bunker and hopes that someone tried to escape. The young man remembers how he hit the monitor, and this clearly did not please their owners. The woman thinks that they need to analyze these cases and find a vulnerability in the system. The young man says something about escape and is immediately deducted donations, indicating the existence of security. The woman does not understand the purpose of what is happening. If they wanted to punish them, they would just lock them somewhere and leave them to die without food and water. But they are fed and even provided with comfort. Apparently, the key question is, why them? Who were they before all this? But the young man admits that he wasn't someone important, but here he got the opportunity to live much better. Soon he invents a small show with socks and entertains the viewers with mini performances, which pleases the man and increases donations. One day he gifts the woman a shower curtain, which angers her because she is used to being independent. In the following days, the young man begins to teach people to draw, but since he himself can't draw, the lessons are humorous, and he himself poses as a model. The viewers like this, and the young man buys furniture for his room with the donations. One day, the woman can't stand it anymore and suggests starting a revolution, calling for an uprising of everyone else. A scandal breaks out among the trio, as the man is convinced that it is here that they got the opportunity to live better than before. That night, the man becomes ill. His cough chokes him, and suddenly he has a seizure, as a result of which his face presses against the monitor because he cannot move. The young man appeals to all subscribers for help. Maybe someone knows what to do in such a case. At this time, the woman tries to find a menu in the computer, but she accidentally presses some button, and suddenly the man's room starts burning, and he burns in front of his friend's eyes, unable to help himself. This causes despair and tears, and for a while, the pair do not communicate. But one night, the young man contacts her, trying to convince her that she is not to blame for what happened. He performs a show for her. Suddenly, she confesses that she wants to get drunk. They order alcohol for themselves and remember the last moment of freedom. Neither of them remembers how they ended up in the bunker. Then people dance in their cells. Later, they remember the old man, and the young man says that he still hears his voice. Suddenly, he admits that she was right, and maybe there are others who can replicate her action. Find a function visible only to them. If they all act together, maybe they can break free. The young man goes live and tells the audience about what happened. He points out oddities in the system where unknown functions sometimes appear, and if they can use these functions to hack, maybe the bunker will open? Suddenly, the athlete joins the conversation, who likes her current state because she decides how to spend her day. And right now, she will take care of herself, so she says goodbye to her new friends. The young man and the woman start reviewing all the strange things that the surrounding bloggers send, and some warmly support the pair. Later, he contacts the athlete again, and she reveals his secret to success. He makes people smile, which is very valuable. Misfortune exists everywhere, but so does happiness, so it's a person's own choice. She encourages him to breathe with her when the woman joins in. She analyzed the unknown functions sent to her. Someone can control the ventilation, and someone can even move the walls. She thinks these are different rooms located at different distances. Therefore, a map of connections needs to be built to break them. Although some do not want to destroy this world, the young man asks not to rush things. Suddenly, the woman takes scissors and cuts her hair, explaining it as a distraction for the bunker creators. If they don't react to their dangerous conversation, then they can be distracted by some actions. Later, the young man starts dealing all the numbers in a row and finds a novice like he once was. And at night, he joins the athlete, who calls on everyone to be happy here and now and not try to destroy reality. A dispute starts between the women, where the athlete accuses the woman of violence against others, and she expresses the thought that the athlete is their kidnapper. The young man fears that if nothing works out, he will be left without an audience, and what will he do then? But later, he still goes live and asks to show how many people are with him now. The number of votes rises to several million, causing his delight. The athlete is outraged. The young man surpassed her in channel reputation and demands to stop all this. A real conflict starts between the women. The athlete demands that others stop influencing the system while the woman asks to increase their efforts. And suddenly, the woman's room ignites and a downpour falls on her rival's room. The young man watches as both of his friends perish and can do nothing. He cries when a door opens behind him to a bright sunny day. Not believing his eyes, he approaches the threshold, but then his monitor comes to life and the young man begins to doubt. He returns to the screen and shouts into it that they managed to do it. There is nothing that cannot be done together. But while he rejoices, the door closes. Thinking, he starts playing his role again, while the number of votes and donations on his monitor rapidly increases. Through the characters, one can observe the stages of a person's immersion in online existence when a gadget becomes a mediator between the personality and others. It can be said that this is a story of life, with many good intentions and talents, but trivially spent on the pursuit of likes. The episode opens with a flashback, capturing the moment Franklin first encounters Irene in a bar. Their meeting is sparked by a serendipitous pool shot that Franklin uses as an opening to engage Irene in conversation. This marks the beginning of their relationship. Leaping ahead about half a century, the narrative catches up with Franklin and Irene, now an elderly couple, deeply in love. Although Irene is confined to a wheelchair, their affection remains strong. Franklin assists her outside, aiming to share a view of the night sky together. They venture to a shed, where a hidden underground tunnel leads them to an unusual door. Upon entering, they find themselves mysteriously elevated to an interstellar viewing platform, as if transported among the stars. Franklin has observed Irene's growing desire to gaze at the stars more frequently over the last year. They visited their special spot a total of 865 times, with visits increasing since Irene's fall the previous year. Attempting to understand her insistence, Franklin finally confesses that he's grown weary of their regular excursions to the stars. He's ready to hand over their secret responsibility to someone else. However, Irene firmly believes that this mystery is theirs alone to decipher. Meanwhile, their neighbor Byron is suspicious that Franklin and Irene are concealing something in their shed, and he's determined to uncover it. The next morning, as they were driving away, Byron hurried to their car, but Franklin, who views him as an irritating busybody, didn't appreciate the intrusion. Later, while attempting to mow his lawn, Franklin brushes him off completely. Back at his house, Byron shares his suspicions with his wife Janine, who advises him to stay out of their neighbor's affairs, insisting it's none of their business. In the car, Irene suggests that Franklin could be friendlier to Byron, but Franklin dismisses the idea. Irene persists, encouraging him to cultivate friendships rather than focusing solely on her. Later, Franklin and Irene visit the hospital. Irene sees her doctor, who plans to run some tests as her symptoms appear to be worsening, although her exact condition remains unspecified. While Irene was with the doctor, Franklin went to run some errands. He then got a call from his granddaughter Denise and ended up going for lunch with her. She's worried about them, having heard from a neighbor that they're roaming around in the middle of the night going for strolls. Franklin passes it off as simply watching the stars, but Denise is not so sure. She's worried and broaches the idea of them leaving the house. Franklin vehemently declines. While Franklin is away, Irene seizes the opportunity to visit an old friend named Sadie at a care home. During her visit, she is disheartened to see Sadie's deteriorating mental state. Feeling the need to confide in someone, Irene shares her secret with Sadie, explaining that she's been on special journeys but is also grappling with a serious illness. When Franklin returns to pick her up, they both look visibly exhausted, the relentless march of time eroding their mental faculties. This is particularly evident with Franklin, who is showing signs of senility, forgetting essential tasks such as refueling the car and picking up Irene from the doctor's office. At their home, Byron is proudly showing Janine his new campaign sign, excited about his run for councilman. Janine suggests he could delay his campaign until next year, but Byron is eager to start immediately. After their conversation, Byron sneaks over to Irene and Franklin's house to snoop around. While investigating, he receives a text from Janine prompting him to leave abruptly. Back at home, the conversation turns to the inevitability of death. Irene Irene encourages Franklin to embrace life fully and consider moving on from their home should she pass away before him. After spending a pleasant evening together, Franklin begins to sing to Irene but soon falls asleep. However, Irene is restless and ready to take action. She writes a note for Franklin, expressing her decision to take control of her situation while she still has the ability. In the note, she promises to see him again and leaves it by the chair as she prepares to leave the house. Irene intends to visit the Martian landscape on her own, a place they've often traveled to together. Just as she is about to leave, she discovers someone lying on the floor, struggling to breathe and desperately seeking her help. The next morning, Franklin is awakened by the sight of Irene crawling toward the house, breathing heavily. She urgently tells him that there's someone in the shed. With concern, Franklin grabs a hammer for protection and goes to investigate. Downstairs, he discovers a stranger doubled over in pain. Franklin immediately assumes the man is a junkie seeking refuge, but Irene senses something more troubling. Adding to the mystery, the man is covered in blood without any visible wounds. Concerned, Franklin decides to call the police. Officer Thomas soon arrives at the scene. He conducts a thorough check of the premises to ensure there are no immediate threats. Meanwhile, the camera subtly focuses on Franklin's back, revealing a patch of blood spatter on his right shoulder, a result of him carrying the bloodied stranger. As Officer Thomas prepares to inspect the upper floor, Irene pulls him aside for a private conversation. She confides in him that Franklin's mental state is deteriorating and that he might be seeing things that aren't there. Her intervention convinces the officer, and he leaves the property under the assumption that the incident was a hallucination on Franklin's part. Meanwhile, the narrative introduces another subplot featuring Stella and her daughter, Tony. They are far from the urban hustle, in the serene mountains leading llamas across the vast, rolling hills, a stark contrast to the urban school environment Tony usually frequents. That evening, Tony welcomes Matthias to their house, believing this could be the beginning of a new friendship. However, unbeknownst to her, Matthias has an ulterior motive. He reveals that he was dared to visit what is rumored to be a haunted house and was offered 4,000 pesos to step inside, casting a shadow over their budding interaction. The local rumors swirling around Tony's grandfather's involvement in cultish activities have piqued the curiosity of the local kids, including Matthias. This revelation devastates Tony, who had mistakenly believed that Matthias's visit was the beginning of a romantic interest. When Stella arrives and finds Tony with Matthias, she quickly intervenes and shoos him away. After dealing with the situation, Stella takes a secretive path to the back of an old church nearby. There, hidden from plain view, is a door that strikingly resembles the one found in Franklin and Irene's shed, suggesting a deeper, mysterious connection between the two locations. Back to Franklin and Irene, as the situation at their home becomes more dire, the stranger on their floor suddenly passes out and starts convulsively shaking. Irene, recognizing the symptoms from a past experience, suspects it could be related to a virus she once battled. She quickly sends Franklin out to get a refill of Tamiflu, hoping it might help. While Franklin is away, Irene takes the opportunity to sift through the stranger's belongings. She finds numerous gold coins and a photograph labeled Gabriel, suggesting a possible identity or connection. With the man coughing uncontrollably and in obvious distress, Irene decides to take matters into her own hands. She prepares a homemade remedy she hopes will alleviate his symptoms and begins to read aloud from a book she found among his possessions, trying to soothe him with her voice. Byron, eager to gather support for his councilman campaign, is out trying to collect signatures from the locals, but he's finding it difficult to get any cooperation. Spotting Franklin entering the pharmacy, Byron seizes the opportunity and approaches him for his signature. However, Franklin declines and hurries inside the pharmacy. Inside, Franklin encounters a new pharmacist who isn't familiar with him or his prescription history. To ensure everything is in order, the pharmacist decides to call the doctor for verification before dispensing any medication. The doctor, wanting to discuss the situation directly, asks to speak with Franklin. This unexpected complication adds another layer to Franklin's already stressful day. Stella, unable to find Tony inside their house, grows anxious and decides to search for her by car. She eventually locates Tony and decides to take her to a restaurant to talk and give her advice over a meal. Tony expresses her feelings of isolation and the mockery she faces from peers because of the mysterious reputation of their house. Stella responds by hinting at a deeper family secret, explaining that every family member is a guardian of something significant, and assures Tony that she will understand her role when the time is right. Their conversation is abruptly interrupted when Stella receives a notification that the alarm at their house has been triggered. Alarmed, they rush back home to check on the situation. situation. Meanwhile, back at Franklin and Irene's place, the stranger regains consciousness and introduces himself as Jude. He's uncertain of his origins, but believes he might be from the mountains. Jude also recalls being carried, which Irene and Franklin assume must have been Franklin's doing, though Franklin has no memory of it. Upon returning with the Tamiflu, Franklin displays a cautious demeanor toward Jude. Unlike Irene, who shows concern and willingness to help, Franklin is reticent and distant, focusing more on Irene as she starts to feel woozy and faint, indicating his primary concern remains her well-being. Denise, who is struggling to stay alert during her lecture, is fortunately assisted by a fellow student named Cliff, who offers her a cup of coffee. This small gesture leads to a connection between the two. They went out for a drink, and she told him about her family, but that was not entirely the truth. She told him she has taken on the significant responsibility of looking after Franklin and Irene. He asked why her father couldn't do it, but she brushed it off, saying he is busy. Meanwhile, a tense conversation unfolds between Franklin and Irene. Franklin confronts Irene about a secret she's been keeping concerning Dr. Maurice's advice. Irene agrees to follow the doctor's instructions, but in return she asks for Franklin's support as she continues to investigate the mysterious doorway and its significance. Although hesitant, Franklin begrudgingly agrees to support her quest. After receiving the notification of the alarm, Stella returns home with a gun, only to discover that an old friend has broken into her house. The intruder questions whether Stella is training Tony, hinting at a connection to the same mysterious elements tied to the doorway. That night, after Franklin has warned Jude not to harm Irene, Jude finds himself unable to sleep. As Denise and Cliff are about to depart, she tells him that she had lied in their conversation earlier, and she told him about her personal challenges, including the emotional weight of her father's voluntary death when she was just 5 years old. Jude quietly takes Irene's letter and stealthily moves through the house. Jude's actions take a startling turn when he retreats to the bathroom with a knife. There, he carefully cuts into his leg, revealing a strange cylindrical object embedded beneath his skin. It appears to be some kind of tracking device. Understanding the implications of being tracked, Jude decisively crushes the device, ensuring it can no longer function. After dealing with the device, he slips out into the night. Franklin delves into the mystery of the gold coins he found among the stranger's belongings. He takes them to a local trader who identifies them as Spanish doubloons, but the exact origin of their minting remains uncertain. Simultaneously, Stella confronts the intruder she found in her home. She sends Tony out and questions him about his presence. He responds by handing her a paper, describing it as a special assignment, and insists that she involve Tony. Meanwhile, Franklin, showing a gesture of care, returns home with a bag of clothes for Jude, the stranger who recently revealed his name. However, he specifically avoids giving Jude any of Michael's belongings, as the memories associated with them are still painfully fresh. Responding to Jude's simple request for food, they all head to a diner. The outing takes an uncomfortable turn when Jude becomes ill and vomits during the ride home. Denise is presented with a significant opportunity by her superior Mark. She's been invited to join a newly forming research group, which promises a substantial salary increase, but also requires a hefty time commitment. This new role would not only be a step up in her career, but would also demand she manage it alongside her ongoing internship, essentially doubling her workload. Faced with the potential benefits and the daunting prospect of increased stress, Denise feels torn and unsure about whether to accept the offer. Throughout these events, fragments of Jude's past begin to surface in his mind. He recalls snippets of his life before arriving at the Yorks, including a conflict with another individual. Byron comes under fire for forging signatures on his campaign. He received a call, and he was told to put his campaign in suspension to not face legal matters. Franklin, acting on Irene's suggestion, takes Jude out for some male bonding in an attempt to better understand the mysterious guest. They spend the day playing chess, a setting that gives Franklin ample time to evaluate Jude's character and intentions. Despite the shared activity, Franklin's suspicions grow, and he concludes that Jude might be a con artist. Convinced that it's best for Jude to leave, Franklin decides to give him $5,000 to help him on his way and drives him to the bus station. However, as Jude prepares to board the bus, Franklin begins to have second thoughts about his decision. The complexity of the situation and perhaps a sense of unresolved doubt lead Franklin to reluctantly invite Jude back, allowing him another chance to prove his intentions and possibly clarify his mysterious connection to their family. At home, Irene makes a startling discovery among Jude's possessions, a mysterious orb that seems to have the ability to disintegrate matter. When she places it on the coffee table, the table vanishes without a trace, leaving her both amazed and alarmed. Meanwhile, Denise decides to visit her grandparents and encounters Jude, who they introduce as their new caretaker. Denise is skeptical of Jude, especially given the peculiar circumstances of his arrival and the strange incidents surrounding him. Although Irene suggests that Denise should head home rather than stay the night, Denise leaves, but not without instructing Jude on her grandparents' needs and expectations. She opts to stay with a friend, driven by a resolve to uncover Jude's true identity. Later that night, Jude has a private conversation with Irene. He confides that he believes his presence at their home is no coincidence. Jude reveals that he is searching for his father, named Gabriel, the same name on the Polaroid found earlier, and he seeks Irene's assistance in this personal quest. In another part of the house, Franklin discovers a bloodied knife in the bathroom. While cleaning up, he notices fragments of the mysterious orb that Irene had found, now broken and swirling up through the sink. Unfortunately, the water quickly washes them away before Franklin can examine them further, deepening the mystery of the strange object and its capabilities. Byron, undeterred by previous accusations of meddling, finds himself unable to resist the lure of the mysterious activities at the Yorks' residence. Driven by curiosity, he sneaks into their property and makes his way to the shed. Inside, he navigates through the clutter until he confronts the secret door, the very threshold that seems to be the heart of the enigmas surrounding Franklin and Irene. Meanwhile, the narrative shifts back to Stella and Tony. In a parallel scene reminiscent of earlier discoveries, Stella takes Tony to a secretive doorway located behind the chapel, a portal similar to the one in the Yorks' shed, but with a distinct feature. This doorway is equipped with a strange control panel that Stella manipulates to set their destination. After entering a sequence of commands, Stella and Tony step through the doorway and find themselves instantly transported to New York City. The scene unfolds with Jude awakening from a distressing nightmare where he's embroiled in a fierce fight with another man. Shaken, he decides to take the mysterious orb he discovered earlier and buries it outside to keep it safe. As he is digging, Byron appears, asserting that this is a private area. Jude, claiming his role as the caretaker, brushes off Byron's curiosity and leaves without divulging any further information. Meanwhile, Franklin's suspicions about Jude continue to deepen, especially after finding the bloodied knife. Determined to uncover Jude's true identity, Franklin visits Officer Thomas, hoping to persuade him to conduct a DNA test on the knife. However, Thomas dismisses the need for such measures, viewing Franklin's elaborate theories as further evidence of his deteriorating mental state. In another part of town, Jude and Irene visit a library where Jude searches through records and discovers that his father had been arrested due to homelessness and claimed amnesia at the time of his arrest. When Irene shares this information with Franklin, he responds with a lighthearted joke, suggesting that forgetfulness must run in Jude's family. Elsewhere, Stella and Tony are navigating their own mysterious venture with a contact named Nick. He leads them to an abandoned warehouse where a machine starts emitting what appears to be serial numbers. Nick explains that while he can help narrow down their search, he will need to accompany them to accurately pinpoint the source of the signal. Throughout this ordeal, Tony remains confused and uncertain about the overarching purpose of their mission, highlighting her struggle to grasp the full scope of their enigmatic activities. Denise finds a temporary respite from her demanding schedule by staying at her friend Katie's place. She wakes up there one morning and opens up about the extreme stress she's been under lately, finding comfort in sharing her struggles with a friend. Back at Irene and Franklin's home, tensions rise to a breaking point. Franklin, increasingly troubled by the unfolding events, accuses Irene of favoring Jude over him. Despite Irene's attempts to clarify her intentions and reassure him, Franklin remains skeptical about the situation and abruptly leaves the house, overwhelmed by doubt and frustration. In a parallel scenario, Byron, who has been actively campaigning for a council seat, reaches a moment of disillusionment. In a symbolic gesture of giving up on his political aspirations, he burns all his campaign signs. As he does this, he notices Franklin driving away. Byron tries to offer a friendly smile and greeting, but the moment is fleeting. After Franklin's departure, Irene confronts Jude about his secretive demeanor. She expresses her concerns about him not sharing details of his life, to which Jude responds with a pained smile, acknowledging her care despite his reticence. Chandra, a nurse who previously worked in the caretaker's house, arrives at Irene and Franklin's home under the guise of offering her freelance services. She reveals that she's now freelancing, though in reality, she was fired for stealing. When Irene informs her that Jude has taken over caretaker duties, Chandra asks to use the bathroom, handing Irene her business card to distribute to any friends in need of her services. However, seizing the opportunity, she sneakily enters Jude's room after her bathroom visit and steals something from him. Meanwhile, Jude handles a phone call with Dale from the pawnbrokers, who speaks about the significant value of the gold coins associated with Jude. Jude, pretending to be Franklin's son during the call, is visibly unsettled by the conversation about the coin's value. After the call, Jude contacts someone, possibly seeking advice or information about the coins. The conversation is cryptic, with the person on the other end uttering Fiat voluntas Dei, which translates to God's will be done, suggesting a deeper, possibly religious or philosophical significance to the coins. Shortly after, Irene comes by to pay Jude for his work and reassures him of her support, irrespective of the mystery surrounding him. However, after Chandra's earlier visit, Jude discovers that an item, a rectangular slab previously hinted at, is missing from his belongings. He quickly connects the theft to Chandra, snatches her business card from the dresser, and heads to the local bar, presumably to track her down and retrieve his stolen item. At a local bar, a series of unexpected encounters and revelations unfold. Jude, who is trying to track down Chandra, ends up at the same bar where Denise and her friend Katie are unwinding. Denise approaches Jude, and they strike up a lively interaction involving shots and dancing. Meanwhile, Byron finds himself in a pool hall where he unexpectedly runs into Franklin. The two begin playing pool, and Byron confronts Franklin about a recent campaign stunt, suspecting Franklin had tipped off the authorities. Franklin firmly denies these allegations, and despite an initially frosty interaction, the two men find common ground. Franklin confides his fears about Irene's feelings toward him, while Byron shares his own personal struggles about feeling like a second choice to his wife, Janine, whom he describes as a consolation prize. Their conversation deepens, and both men, now heavily intoxicated, step outside the bar. Here, Byron admits he may have misjudged Franklin and probes about the mysterious doorway. Franklin, trying to dismiss it as merely a bomb shelter, is finally persuaded by Byron's persistence to show him the site. However, when they reach the supposed transportive shelter, it fails to operate, leaving Byron to laugh it off as a hoax, thinking it's just a bizarre construction. Simultaneously, Irene wakes to find Jude missing and decides to drive out to find him. As she searches, Jude, leaving the bar, is stopped by the police. The confrontation triggers traumatic memories of a past altercation where he had to defend himself, explaining the previously noted blood. As Irene drives past, she sees Jude face down on the hood of a police car, being detained, a sight that shocks and worries her about his fate. In the police station, Irene confronts a distressed Jude, who has run off and now finds himself entangled in a legal predicament. Urging him to be honest, Irene demands the truth if she is to help him. Jude, finally opening up, reveals that he was held in an isolated compound designed to guard the secret of the doorway, an enigmatic portal leading to what he describes as a barren alien planet, not the symbolic gateway others might believe it to be. Jude further explains that the blood found on him was from an altercation with men who tried to prevent his escape from the compound. The stakes are high, as these individuals, should they find him, intend to kill him. Jude's ultimate mission is to locate Gabriel, who had previously ventured through the same mysterious doorway. With this newfound understanding, Irene manages to persuade the police to release Jude. On their way home, Irene attempts to downplay the significance of her own doorway. However, Jude insists that their doorway is part of a larger destiny, making it one of the most crucial portals among many. Meanwhile, the subplot with Tony, Stella, and Nick sheds light on the scientific and mystical dimensions of the doorways. They discover that the doorways are connected by invisible particles that span vast distances. While Stella views this phenomenon as a divine gift, Nick adheres to a scientific interpretation. Their quest to locate a specific package leads them to a massive transmission tower. Nick breaks into the network to pinpoint the package's location. However, their operation is nearly compromised when a utility worker arrives. Thinking quickly, Stella subdues the worker, securing him to his van's steering wheel with cable ties, thus ensuring their mission continues uninterrupted. As Nick and Tony proceed to their next destination in Illinois, Tony remains quiet, still processing the events from earlier. Meanwhile, Denise visits Irene and Franklin's house while they are at the doctor's, intending to return a jacket Franklin left at the bar. During her visit, she casually inquires about Jude's father, sparking a light-hearted response from him. Their interaction is interrupted by Irene, who returns with positive news from the doctor. Franklin takes a proactive step towards proving the existence of the alien land landscape by handing Byron a disposable camera with undeveloped photos and urging him to get them developed as proof. In another subplot, Irene and Jude visit Chandra's place to recover the items she took. While Irene distracts Chandra with fabricated concerns about Jude, he sneaks upstairs and finds both the strange black trinket and a necklace containing a similar device to what was on his leg. Confronting Chandra, she defensively claims the items were gifts from those at the care home. Irene, seeking further information, promises to keep Chandra's secret in exchange for the source of the necklace. This revelation links the necklace to the tracking devices, explaining why Jude was so keen to destroy the one in his leg. Byron, having developed the photos, finds evidence of the alien world, capturing images of Irene and Franklin in that setting. Meanwhile, Stella, in a distressing episode in the woods, experiences flashbacks of her mother's death, adding emotional depth and backstory to her character. Byron's curiosity leads him to research conspiracy theories online, where he discovers a reference to the impossible door, a concept sketched by an Argentine missionary in 1723, which he connects to their mysterious doorway. Back at the doorway, Franklin and Byron inspect the area and notice bloody fingerprints on the control panel, the same type found at Stella's portal. Upon opening the control panel, they realize the orb is missing, which Jude had previously buried. Byron, piecing together clues from his observations in the woods, locates the buried jar and recovers the orb, further entangling himself in the mysteries surrounding the doorway and its secrets. The scene opens with a strained atmosphere at the dinner table, where Irene casually discusses teaching Jude how to drive. Franklin, however, remains detached from the conversation, his disinterest culminating in him excusing himself to take out the trash. During this mundane chore, he stumbles upon a letter from Irene, the contents of which shake his very foundations. Confronted with his feelings, Franklin accuses Jude of bringing turmoil into their home. Jude's retort, questioning the true source of the household's issues, leaves Franklin even more unsettled, prompting him to walk away from the confrontation. Meanwhile, in Illinois, Tony and Stella settle into a motel for the night. The situation escalates when Nick, having brought the orb with him, carelessly plays with it in the presence of a hired companion. Stella intervenes, dismissing the hooker and sternly reminding Nick of the peril they face, citing the tragic fate of his brother as a grim warning. Elsewhere, Byron, brimming with excitement, catches up with Franklin to discuss his discovery of the orb. However, Franklin, overwhelmed by personal troubles, dismissively informs Byron that he's preoccupied with other matters. In a significant turn of events, Denise decides to quit school, a decision that has been looming for several chapters. Her friend reacts negatively, driving Denise to leave and join Jude on his quest. Jude shares new details about his father, Gabriel, who similarly had to cut a tracker out of his leg after escaping shadowy pursuers. Returning to the domestic front, Franklin, after spending a night at Byron's, confronts Irene about the discovered letter and her perceived broken promises. The confrontation underscores the deep fractures in their marriage, revealing a relationship in crisis. Concurrently, Byron attempts to operationalize the orb by placing it in the control panel in the basement shed. Despite his efforts, the mechanism fails to activate due to insufficient power. Tensions between Nick and Stella continue to simmer, with Nick provocatively mentioning Stella's late brother, Caleb. Stella reacts violently, punching Nick and leaving him with a bloody nose as she takes off with the van, stranding him at the motel. Jude, driven by the quest to trace his father's footsteps, decides to embark on a road trip to a remote area in Michigan. Denise, eager for the journey and the stories it may uncover, joins him. Irene, seeking a sense of adventure and perhaps a new purpose beyond her routine life, decides to accompany them, despite Franklin's decision to stay behind. For Franklin, their marriage and the life they built together have always been sufficient, but Irene yearns for more, highlighting a growing divide between their desires and aspirations. Back at home, Franklin handles unexpected business regarding the Spanish doubloons. He receives a call from Dale, the pawnbroker, who is eager to learn more about the origin of these rare coins. Franklin is bewildered, especially since it was Jude who initially dealt with Dale about the coins. Unable to provide answers and feeling confused, Franklin hangs up. This interruption is timely, as Byron urgently summons him to show him something new. Byron leads Franklin to the basement of the shed, where he has set up a large generator. His plan is to charge the circuitry connected to the doorway, hoping to provide enough power to activate it. They proceed with the setup, and the activation causes a massive surge of energy. The blast sends shockwaves through the neighborhood, disrupting electrical systems and affecting the natural environment. evidenced by flickering lights and birds dropping from the sky. Simultaneously, Stella and Tony, who had been tracking related anomalies, receive a precise ping on their equipment indicating the location they need to head towards, spurred by the energy surge from the doorway. In the shed's basement, the power-up is successful, and Franklin and Byron find themselves transported to the alien viewpoint. They are greeted by a breathtakingly beautiful vista, a stark contrast to the mundane world they've left behind. Overwhelmed by the beauty in the surreal experience, Byron expresses a desire to explore further, but this time, Franklin, who has previously been apprehensive about such adventures, admits that he is no longer afraid. This moment marks a significant personal breakthrough for Franklin, reflecting his readiness to embrace the unknown. Franklin reveals to Byron the spacesuits he's been designing for years, but never had the courage to use. Inspired, Byron vows to help make them functional. Meanwhile, Irene, Jude, and Denise arrive in Michigan at the home of a woman named Hannah, who recognizes Gabriel from a Polaroid Jude shows her. She explains that she and Gabriel were once romantically involved, but he disappeared 15 years ago without a trace. Feeling their trip might be futile, Irene considers heading back, but Hannah persuades them to stay overnight. That evening, Irene hears a suspicious noise upstairs, but is reassured by Hannah that it's nothing. Unknown to the guests, Hannah enters a hidden room where a man named Paul is monitoring everything. They discuss making contact with Franklin after Paul plays a voicemail from him about the coins. Back home, Byron skips Janine's barbecue to focus on his project with Franklin. During a tense conversation, Janine admits she reported Byron's campaign forgery out of a desire for a simpler life, revealing a deep rift between their aspirations. Denise confronts Irene, feeling pushed away, and Irene admits she feels guilty about Michael's past struggles, believing she doesn't deserve Denise's love. Overcome with emotion, Irene apologizes, and they share a heartfelt embrace, understanding each other better through flashbacks of Michael's depression. Meanwhile, Tony finds a video of Jude singing karaoke, which leads Stella to confirm that Jude is the apostate they've been looking for. Tony calls Nick for help in tracing Jude's steps. On another front, Byron and Franklin test the spacesuits they've been working on. Byron explores the alien landscape, excitedly communicating back to Franklin until he goes silent after claiming to have found something incredible. Left alone, Franklin fears the worst, struggling with guilt and concern over Byron's sudden disappearance. Irene takes Denise into the shelter to explain the turmoil she's been experiencing. She shares that after Michael's voluntary death, she struggled to find a reason to continue living and hoped the portal might help her cope with her grief. Irene confesses that her intention was to shield Denise from the portal's complexities, but Jude's arrival has caused events to spiral out of control. Feeling betrayed by the deception, Denise walks away, upset by the revelations. Meanwhile, Tony and Stella encounter Chandra and a sinister man on the shore. The man exchanges gold doubloons worth much more than the $3,000 Chandra demands for information about Jude. After obtaining what he needs, the man abruptly kills Chandra, retrieves the doubloons, and warns that he will ensure Stella remains tough. He then sets Chandra and her car on fire, leaving Tony to witness the horrifying scene from a distance. Jude panics upon realizing the orb is missing from the garden. Meanwhile, Franklin searches for Byron on the observatory deck, but finds no trace of him, leaving both men distressed. Janine, worried, questions Franklin about her husband's whereabouts, but he reassures her without giving specifics. Inside, Jude confronts Franklin about the dangers of their endeavor, explaining that there's nothing but wasteland on the alien planet. Stella and Tony discuss their predicament, with Stella admitting they can't escape the man pursuing them. As the man leads Tony to the York house, noticing dead birds signals they're close, he reveals to Tony that Caleb is her father, not Stella's brother. At the garden, Tony finds Franklin held at gunpoint and forced inside. Meanwhile, Jude thanks Denise for her help at the bar, but their chat is cut short when Stella starts shooting, causing Jude to flee into the woods. Denise returns to the York house and finds herself and her grandparents also at gunpoint. The stranger coerces Irene into revealing the doorway's location, then heads to the shed. Irene comforts a distraught Tony, who doubts their mission and condemns their actions, citing Chandra's death as a stark contradiction to their supposed divine mission. The stranger alters his plans and informs Stella, using the family as leverage to capture Jude, known as the apostate. Upon his arrival, Jude is assaulted by the man, hinted to have been sent by an unidentified woman, though details remain vague. During a scuffle, Franklin manages to overpower the stranger, who is then tasered, bound, and gagged. Stella and Tony, with the captive in tow, leave their old lives behind, driven away with a new bargaining chip. Simultaneously, Jude and Denise decide decide to escape through the doorway to Bangkok, distancing themselves from the chaos. Irene resolves to limit their use of the mysterious doorway, dismissing its once-thought potential, which Franklin accepts with a mix of relief and determination to resolve unfinished business regarding Byron's fate. As Stella and Tony are ambushed and forced off the road by Hannah and her associates, the tension escalates. Hannah confronts Cornelius, the bound stranger, intensifying the conflict. Meanwhile, the couple embarks on another journey to an unknown alien planet. However, Franklin experiences a system failure in his oxygen supply, causing him to lose consciousness. Irene follows him, bravely entering the alien environment without a spacesuit to help him. It turns out the atmosphere of this planet is suitable for human life. She removes her husband's helmet, and together they discover an ancient city beyond the hill. It turns out that guardians of humanity have been living here for about 100,000 years. They are the ones who built hundreds of quantum portals on Earth and many other planets. This is where the first season ends. We were left with a setup for the second season, but unfortunately the series was cancelled.
The crew of the spaceship is in cryogenic sleep. Astronaut George Taylor is dictating his final report. Exactly half a year ago by the ship's time, they left Cape Canaveral. Over 7 centuries have passed on Earth during this period. The people who sent them on this journey have long since died, but Taylor has no regrets about what they've done. Everything seems different from here. The flow of time is distorted and space is limitless. The only thing he would like to know is whether humanity, the miracle of the universe that sent him into the sky, continues to wage war. A last glance at the clock. It's March 27, 2673 on Earth. He looks at his comrades and lies down in his place. After a while, the ship makes an emergency landing on an unknown planet and finds itself in the middle of a body of water. The crew wakes up and realizes that they have slept much longer than the calculated time. But the most horrifying shock is the death of the only woman, Stewart. At that moment, water begins to enter the ship. They need to evacuate, especially since the samples showed that the atmosphere is suitable for breathing. Looking at the ship's clock, which is frozen at Earth time, November 25, 3978, the crew abandons the sinking ship. Boarding a life raft, the humans sail to shore, marveling at the grandeur of the surrounding nature. There is no sign of intelligent life anywhere. Taylor reminds them that they are 320 light-years from Earth on an unknown planet in the constellation Orion. It is impossible to determine more precisely as no one has had time to look at the instrument readings. Upon landing on the shore, Taylor takes inventory of what they were able to salvage from the ship. A pistol, 20 rounds of ammunition, a first aid kit, and a 3-day supply of food and water. The only question now is how long is a day here? They are discussing the strange death of Stewart, apparently caused by depressurization. It seems they were flying for 18 months, while on Earth it has been about 2,000 years. There is no hope of returning, and time has erased everything they knew. Therefore, they need to start studying this planet. Analysis show that nothing can grow here as there is very little carbon dioxide. But there is nothing dangerous to human health either. They have 72 hours left until they run out of food. Landon sets up a small flag of the United States of America on the shore, and the astronauts set off on their journey. The surroundings are strange and wild, bizarre rocks and lifeless canyons. The people almost get trapped under landslides several times. Thunderbolts light up the sky without bringing rain, and the sky itself is covered with clouds with no satellites or landmarks. One thing they know for sure, there's a time gap between them and Earth. Their loved ones died 20 centuries ago. Even if they returned, no one would remember them. Taylor urges his comrades on. Why did they embark on this flight? Was it for fame, new knowledge, or the opportunity to live longer? But now they have lived much longer than any other human on Earth. Only Taylor set out on this journey because he's a dreamer. He is confident that there must be something better than humans in the universe. At that moment, Dodge calls out to them. He has found life. A barely noticeable green shoot has sprouted from rocky desert. This means there are plants here and they need to find them. The group continues forward. Everywhere they look, they see unfriendly rocks, but ahead they see green bushes and some strange crosses that resemble scarecrows. After walking a little further, the astronauts are thrilled to finally see water ahead. The excited group quickly sheds their clothes and jumps in. After that, they swim towards the shore and notice human footprints on the sand. Suddenly, they see dark figures stealing their clothes. The men chase after the thieves, who leave behind obvious traces of their path, such as broken clothing and scraps. Soon they come across their torn clothes and put on whatever remains. Finally, they reach a plane and see many people behaving quite strangely. They are silent and pay no attention to the astronauts, instead calmly gathering and eating different fruits. The Earthlings are puzzled as their fellow humans seem almost feral. Luckily, they are not cannibals. Suddenly, an ominous sound comes from the forest and the people start running. The astronauts try to understand what is happening and suddenly see armed riders. Shots are fired and then monkeys appear on the clearing, apparently hunting the humans. The Earthlings attempt to flee and in the heat of the chase they split up. Shots are heard from all directions and Dodge is killed. Taylor, along with others, runs towards the river and just when it seems like he's about to make it, one of the monkeys shoots him in the neck, rendering him unconscious. The tied-up astronaut is thrown into a cell with other prisoners. He's surprised to see the monkeys taking pictures as if it's a souvenir. George is brought to a hospital where he's examined by scientist monkeys. They examine Taylor, who's wearing strange clothing, but two chimpanzees argue about the need to study the animal's brains, ignoring Taylor, who's still recovering from his throat wound and unable to speak. In the morning, Dr. Zyra does her rounds. She's intrigued by a strange animal she calls Bright Eyes because he pretends to talk in a hilariously convincing way. Taylor tries to demonstrate that he's intelligent and attempts to snatch the pencil from Zyra's hand. At that moment, Dr. Zaius enters. Zyra shows him the exceptional human, but Zaius is skeptical and sees him merely imitating. Zyra tries to draw attention to the human's uniqueness by highlighting his unconventional use of a blanket as clothing and his unusual hand movements. Perhaps he's intelligent, but Zaius is irritated, dismissing it all as cheap tricks. Humans are dangerous and must be destroyed. Later, they bring a female human as a gift and lock her in Taylor's cell. The next day, George and his companion are walking in the yard in a large cage. Zyra brings her fiancé, an archaeologist named Cornelius, to show him Taylor, but Cornelius sees nothing special about him. While the apes argue, George writes in the sand, but nobody pays attention to him. At that moment, Dr. Zaius arrives, annoyed at Zyra with her human again. Suddenly, a wild man attacks George and a fight breaks out. The guards drag Taylor away and Zaius sees the letters George wrote but quickly erases them. Zyra apologizes to Taylor but he snatches the paper and pencil and writes his name on the piece of paper. Zyra is astonished and takes him home. Cornelius doesn't believe her stories, it's all just tricks, humans can't write. They try to figure out where he learned it and Taylor writes the name of his school. The apes are shocked, could he really be intelligent? The man explains that they came from another planet. Cornelius is puzzled, but flying is impossible. Then Taylor crafts a paper airplane. Afterwards, he asks to see the maps and explains where they landed and how they got there. Zyra and Cornelius argue fervently. She claims that humans are a mutation, the missing link between apes and monkeys, and it is quite possible that monkeys evolved from humans. Dr. Zaius, who enters the scene, discovers the paper airplane, crushes it, and orders the man to be taken to a cell. Taylor and Nova sleep in their cell when the arriving apes order Taylor to be prepared for a castration operation, but the man breaks free and runs out of the cell. He manages to hide in the ape temple but is noticed, and the man has to run through the ape city again. Taylor ends up in a museum where stuffed humans are exhibited. Shocked, he runs out into the street but gets caught in a net, where Zyra finds him, and then the voice returns to Taylor, shocking the apes. Later in the cell, Taylor tries to teach Nova how to speak, but the apes take the girl away and put her in the cell across from him. The man tells her about his life on Earth, but he didn't love anyone there. He wonders if Nova can love. The apes put a collar on him and take him to trial. A hearing is now taking place, and Zyra and Cornelius are ready to act as his attorneys. The judges are outraged. He has no rights because he's not an ape. But then what is he being tried for? The court gives a continuance to his lawyers, but Taylor intends to defend himself. A theologian scientist is called to testify, trying to prove the man's irrationality as he does not know the answers to the simplest questions. But Taylor cannot know them as he has not studied their culture. A person is prohibited from speaking, so he writes his statement and submits it to the court. Cornelius reads that Taylor is a space explorer and arrived from another planet, but the apes do not believe him. They demand to bring the people captured with him. And Taylor sees Landon, but he does not recognize his friend, and the scar is found on his head. George realizes that Dr. Zaius destroyed the man's brain. George is dragged back to the court. And then Cornelius defends Taylor. He did not lie when he said he came from the Forbidden Zone. He described it very accurately, and Cornelius himself was there, and he found traces of ancient ape culture. Zyra continues the defense. If he did not come from another planet, he was born on this one. She found no reason why people cannot speak. The problem is not in anatomy but in the brain, and that is the truth, but nobody wants to listen. Zyra and Cornelius are accused of scientific heresy and the tribunal is closed. The fate of the man is predetermined. He is handed over to Zaius, who intends to perform operations on him. George is outraged. How could such an upside-down civilization arise? And most importantly, why is Zaius so afraid of him? Zyra cannot accept this and organizes the escape of Taylor and Nova. Outside the city, Cornelius meets them with horses and supplies. He suggests returning to the spacecraft landing site. A small caravan sets off and reaches the river. If they follow it, they will reach the sea. Soon they reach the place where Cornelius was excavating. He's ready to take the man to the cave. And then Zyra sees the pursuit. Dr. Zaius, who caught up with the fugitives, is in for an unpleasant surprise. Taylor is armed. The Earthling offers a compromise to the doctor. If Cornelius can prove that their culture is not the oldest and originated from humans, he will leave them alone. Everyone goes into the cave. While Cornelius shows off his findings, Taylor discovers spare parts of a human, a dental plate, glasses, and a heart valve. But the main discovery is a human doll that says the word mama. Zaius tries to find a reasonable explanation when gunshots are heard outside. Everyone rushes to the exit. It's the makeshift doctors who, unable to keep their words, have attacked the fugitives' escorts. Taylor takes Dr. Zaius hostage and orders everyone to leave. Taylor will release him in exchange for a horse, food, and water for him and his woman. But before leaving, he asks the doctor why he always feared him, and he answers because he's a man, and that his ancestors are to blame for the lifeless Forbidden Lands, for he is the lowest and most treacherous beast. The people leave, and the doctor orders the cave to be blown up and Zyra and Cornelius to be arrested. He saves the future of his people. Taylor and Nova ride along the beach. Suddenly, the man jumps off the horse in horror. He has returned, and they did it after all. They blew them all up and destroyed civilization, let them burn in hell. Nova looks at Taylor in fear. She doesn't understand what is before her. The upper part of the Statue of Liberty rising on the ocean shore. The film is based on the book by French writer Pierre Boulle, who considered his novel one of his least successful works and therefore had serious doubts about its success on the big screen. But in the end, the film ranked 350th on Empire magazine's list of the 500 greatest films. The next day, Faraday records a message to his wife. He explains that on Earth they would be called a family, and their children would be real children and not dolls. It seems as though he's beginning to understand what emotions are. Drones on Antea have no right to choose, but on Earth the range of choices is astounding. There can be dozens of varieties of just coffee. Even children can choose. Humans create rituals out of simple actions. For example, the ritual of family dining or talking to God. And during meals, people share their day's events. They also experience a sense of joy which Faraday wishes to experience with his wife. Each generation here produces a handful of great minds. Justin is one of them. The number of emotions experienced by people in a day is absurd. And everyone around Faraday lives in fear of some kind. The fear of failure leads Clay to meet with Finch. After a tough conversation, he still pleads for another week, as Faraday was almost done building the device. Faraday then continues to explain that on Earth, everyone has their own self, but on Antea, they're born either as knowers or drones, but here everyone creates themselves. And people also believe in something higher, that is, in God. One day, Josiah suddenly cuts off a conversation about synthesis and leaves the table, and this marks the beginning of his changes. Then a man plays a jazz record explaining what it is and how it originated. While improvisation was inexplicable, Faraday tries to explain it to his wife. Meanwhile, Elizabeth tells Clay that the signal in the tornado came from somewhere in Southeast Asia. Also, the stewardess on the plane, Faraday, was on posted about it afterwards. After seeing Clay off, Elizabeth calls someone on the phone and asks for a meeting. At this time, Eddie informs his brother about the desire of oil magnate Thorne to buy half of the Origin Corporation. In London, Josiah notices a music store. He then picks up a guitar and starts playing, astonishing the salesman, but suddenly the man faints. Justin finds him in the hospital, and although doctors were sure everything was fine, Faraday tells how Josiah was born in the Bahamas and turned his genius to music in his youth. But his wife left him after their daughter was born, and the alien confesses that she shared his DNA with the old man, which is now rewriting Josiah's human genome, and what he will turn into is unknown. Josiah then leaves the house and goes to a bridge. There he finds a wasp nest and stares at it for a long time, and upon returning home, starts writing an endless equation. The doctor arrives and announces that his blood oxygen level is elevated. Justin blames everything on Faraday, but suddenly, Faraday realizes that Josiah translated his daughter's equation into sound frequencies and wrote a song, the key to the synthesis process. He sets up a keyboard instrument in front of the device and asks Josiah to play its melody. Well, the man begins to play, and gradually, by changing frequencies and tempo, he manages to activate the device. Faraday joins him, and everything works out. That night, Elizabeth takes Josiah's medical chart from the doctor and reports of Clay about Faraday's successful experiment. Looking at the test results, she figures out that Newton is in Cambodia, where a cement bunker can be seen in the middle of the jungle. Clay informs Finch about this, and she forbids him to go there. But the agent sends a special force team to Cambodia. The soldiers enter the building, which turns out to be empty, but inside they find unknown plants whose dust kills them. Clay watches this in horror through a mirror screen. Meanwhile, Molly asks her family to help her with an assignment and create a family tree. But they have no photos, so Faraday draws a very similar family portrait, to which Molly asks to add him. At this time, Hutch and Eddie attend the presentation of the new oncology center of the Magni, born because Eddie is obsessed with the idea of using it to protect against the CIA. Clay's people try to understand what happened in the bunker of Cambodia, and Elizabeth finds power lines laid out of the bunker, but can't yet track exactly where. Josiah notices that the fingerprints are disappearing from his fingers, and he hears synapses forming in his brain, and realizes that he's becoming an Anthean. At Eddie's estates, a meeting begins, attended by Clay. Justin realizes that he is not a scientist at all, and starts suspecting that something is not right. She doesn't want Faraday to fall into the hands of those who tore Newton apart. And later, Finch reprimands Clay for the soldiers' deaths and orders him to fly to Washington. Realizing that their work could be blocked by the CIA, Justin leaves, and Faraday activates the system, calling Newton to start asking questions. He doesn't understand why the launch was delayed, as it's fatal for Antea. Newton, impressed with his rebirth, advises learning to lie. To outsmart the CIA, he must make himself a legend, as Fame could not be killed. Newton disconnects, and Elizabeth, rushing into the laboratory, fails to see anything. Thinking it over, Faraday suggests making their work public, as the CIA loves silence. Hutch arranges a meeting with a journalist friend, and Faraday talks about a new energy source and the CIA's threat to freeze the project. Eddie learns that a man named Clay emerged from a witness protection program. Clay at the moment tries to explain himself to a committee and shows an order signed by Finch and talks about the tape of Newton's interrogation. The woman is shocked, as she did not expect much treachery from her protege. Clay gets a permission to continue the case. Elizabeth shows Justin camera footage from Cambodia, but Newton was not there, even though the bunker was sending a signal into space. Apparently, the alien was talking to his people and warns that Clay will never allow the machine to be taken unless they catch Newton. Justin tells Faraday about the soldiers' deaths, but he doesn't believe that Newton could have killed people. That night, Clay comes to Eddie and tells her that he and his mother came to America from Russia, but the woman turned out to be a terrorist. She blew up the building where she worked, abandoning her son to fate. That's when Finch found and adopted him, and he doesn't know where his real mom is now. And he destroyed his foster mother today, and meanwhile, Faraday also finds the Cambodian recordings and hears Newton's signal to Antea. He admits to Justin that Newton deceived everyone, and he never intended to return home because he wanted to bring the Antheans here. But he, Faraday, promises to do everything to save Earth. Newton transmits the signals intercepted by the CIA, but they cannot decrypt them. Justin is sure that the machine will still be taken, so she asks her friend to take Molly away. They then rush to the laboratory, and Elizabeth immediately reports this to Clay. Faraday dismantles the machine, gives the core to Justin, orders her and Josiah to leave, and stays in the laboratory. The pair barely manage to avoid Clay and his henchmen, and agents burst into the laboratory where they are met by Faraday. But after driving away, Justin decides to return for the alien, and in the laboratory, Faraday, seeing the agents, detonates a gas cylinder. Later, a stunned Clay sees Josiah carrying Faraday away, but is unable to stop it. Faraday regains consciousness and names Mary's phone number. Justin calls her and drives to the monastery. The sister immediately orders the preparation of the operating room and instructs to hide the device. It turns out that Faraday lost a lot of blood, but first the bullet must be removed. When Mary cuts the skin, strange tentacles jump out of the alien's body, frightening the sisters. But Mary assures them that he is an angel. Hutch receives an offer to sell his part of Origin for a large sum. Although he doesn't understand why Magnate Thorne would want a blown-up laboratory, he agrees. In the monastery, Mary sets up women on lookout posts, and Josiah announces that he's ready to give his blood to Faraday, convincing the sisters that he's a Nephilim, half angel, half human. Clay's people search Justin's house, and Elizabeth finds a clue but reports it to her mysterious contacts. At the time in the monastery, Mary confesses to Justin that she got Newton addicted to alcohol, thus ruining his life. Therefore, she asked Justin to do everything to save Faraday as she loves him, although she doesn't yet realize it. In the meantime, Clay's assistant traces a call from Justin and the agents and learns their location. Mary begins a blood transfusion operation from Josiah to Faraday. Clay's agents rush to the monastery, while Elizabeth warns someone that the alien has been found. Meanwhile, to buy time to complete the operation, the sisters and Mary arm themselves and fend off against the agents. A shootout begins, and Clay demands the surrender of the alien, but the sisters stand their ground. However, they run out of bullets, and Mary orders everyone to run while she kneels at the altar. There, Clay finds her, and the woman asks him to say his real name, and he admits that he is Ivan. But the nun corrects him, as his real name is Judas, and the agent shoots her. Hearing the shot, Justin goes into the room and encounters Clay. He orders Faraday, Justin, and the device to be taken, leaving the old man behind. Mary regains consciousness and crawls to the operating room with her last strength. She reaches Josiah's hand and dies happily. Justin's friend and Molly fall into the hands of unknown people. At the same time, Elizabeth warns Clay that they don't have the algorithm to activate the core, and he reports that he has interrogation experience. The alien and Justin are brought to a demolished laboratory and tied to chairs. Seeing Justin being beaten, Faraday confesses that the recorded signal from the tornado is an order for the remaining Anteans to prepare for flight to Earth. Clay takes Justin to another room and orders Elizabeth to guard while he deals with Faraday. The agents start torturing and demanding to confess when and how the aliens will arrive. Elizabeth asks Justin for the algorithm, but Justin remembers how the girl betrayed her family. She allowed Clay to kill in the monastery, so how is she any better than him? Clay continues the torture, but it had no effect on the alien. And instead, Faraday manages to enrage Clay, claiming that it was Finch who used him and not the other way around. The agent orders water torture, but it turns out to be a gift for Faraday as he loves the water. Then Elizabeth remembers about the X-ray, and it truly causes Faraday pain, and he starts screaming, which Justin hears. Suddenly, Watt appears before Faraday and advises him to make something up for Clay. Elizabeth notices this and realizes that the alien is losing his mind. Watt, meanwhile, suggests to Faraday that Clay had two families. The alien starts seeing that one family abandoned the boy, and the other he betrayed himself. This turns out to be the boy's eternal pain, and Clay gets angry and shoots Faraday in the leg. Visions of Antea, his family, and the flight flash before the alien, and he gives Clay a vision about the imminent arrival of a ship prepared by Newton. The synthesis machine is the ship's engine, but without Faraday it won't work, and the alien offers Clay to play Russian roulette. And this is because he can entrust synthesis only to someone who won't hesitate to sacrifice themselves for progress. Faraday tells Clay about his biological mother's dossier, which he found on the internet. He'll say where she is if Clay loads a bullet, spins the chamber, and pulls the trigger. The agent will have a chance to ask 5 questions, and if he survives, Faraday will give him the synthesis. The agent agrees to the terms, and they start the game of Russian roulette. Clay asks about the world of Antea. Faraday tells, and the agent pulls the trigger, and he survives. Finally, they get to the main question for Clay about his mother, and the alien confesses that everything with his biological mother was planned and executed by Finch. She was part of a team working on Newton, and she deliberately deprived the boy of his family and took away his name. Clay, driven mad, points the gun at Faraday, but Elizabeth, who enters, shoots first, killing the agent, and she contacts someone and reports that she has Faraday and Justin, and soon people from oil magnate Thorne arrive at the bunker. Molly has been with them for a long time and is safe, and Josiah is also alive, but his illness has returned. All of them are now under Thorne's protection as he sees the future in synthesis. The people are taken to meet the magnate, and in a vine-covered cave where Buddhist monks sit on the floor, they meet Newton. Faraday recalls how on Antea the knowers took seeds from him that was supposed to sprout on Earth. In the present, Faraday expresses outrage over his dissection, but Newton draws attention to the surrounding vegetation. He had given the monks Antea seeds in exchange for shelter and permission to observe their prayers. This area is a complete magnetic anomaly, which is why satellites see nothing and the CIA cannot find him. Therefore, no one could spot the huge spaceship that Newton built. He shows the ship to Faraday, who realizes that only the knowers should come to Earth. Faraday is shocked because it was the knowers who made all the decisions that led to Antea's demise, and the drones just followed their orders. But now it's the knowers who must perish. Justin also realizes that after the arrival of the knowers, humans will become drones, and after all, the reborn Josiah stopped experiencing emotions and began to prioritize efficiency over love. Newton insists that only the merging of races will give Earth a chance to survive, but Justin is adamantly against it. She refuses to unlock the device algorithm, which she altered before fleeing the laboratory. She leaves, and Newton forces his student to learn the algorithm, as he's destined to be the one who will greet the aliens on Earth and prevent their killing. This is because he will become a legend after becoming the head of the Origin Corporation. Faraday demands to take his family on the ship, but Newton advises forgetting about them and staying Justin. He doesn't want to see drones on Earth. Faraday was wrongly classified as a servant because he always asks questions. Faraday finds Justin, who's disappointed in him, and demands to be taken home, but he couldn't do that until he learns the algorithm. He confesses that it was she and her family who taught him to love. Justin gives in and goes home, and they again live in their old house. Josiah's illness has returned, and the woman is disappointed. but her father reminds her of faith, which will help them endure everything. 3 months later, Elizabeth visits Justin, and the woman confesses that she betrayed them for money. But now the CIA will take revenge on her and sooner or later kill her. But before that, they will take Faraday, and Elizabeth gives her cross to Justin and asks her for forgiveness, and Justin reveals to her Thorne's identity. Later, she accidentally finds Faraday's device, which alerts her to an approaching tornado. Justin follows its directions and enters the hurricane's eye. Meanwhile, news reports broadcast a man ready to share a new type of energy with the world. In the evening, in a huge theater, Faraday appears on stage and he begins to talk about everything that happened. Simultaneously, agents head to Justin and Hutch's home. At the theater, a sniper targets Faraday, but he pulls out the synthesis box, forcing the sniper to stop. Faraday is brought to Finch, and he refuses to answer until he sees Justin and Hutch. Although Finch is sure that she is one, the couple is brought in. Then Faraday reminds them that the controlling stake in the new enterprise now belongs to Justin and Hutch, and without their consent, no one can do anything with the device. Faraday will fly to Antea and bring back the remaining people of his planet to Earth. Finch threatens all three with imprisonment, and in response, Faraday announces that in 12 hours, the blueprints for quantum synthesis will appear on the internet, and people will get it for free, and the USA will no longer be the world's owner. Finch threatens Justin's family, but Justin reminds her that against the system is the entire population of Earth, and now the CIA will have to worry about their safety. Later, Faraday comes to Newton, who admits that he's proud of him. Later, Faraday visits Josiah to return his hat and thank him for showing him his paternal love. He says goodbye to Molly, teaching her Antean gestures, as she gives him a logo figurine. The hardest moment for him arrives saying goodbye to Justin, and he will bring his family there, although they might not recognize him now. But the woman is sure that everything will be as it should be. Faraday prepares for departure, while Molly and Justin plant Anthea seeds near their house. And at night, they watch the launch from a distant star. At times very naive, at times deep and subtle, with philosophy, with reflections on family values, but overall, lovers of science fiction should really enjoy it. The movie begins in Leningrad in 1940. A young woman named Anya works as a seamstress in a factory where a young machinist, Vasily, who is very serious, notices her and even asks her to introduce him to her only relative, her brother Peter. However, Anya asks for a little more time, and the young man agrees to wait until the next day. But as the girl leaves for her lunch break, he quietly follows her, admiring her. Anya walks down the street, looking at a dirigible hovering above, from which German journalists are filming the city below. At this moment, a tram driven by Peter pulls up to an intersection. Suddenly, Anya realizes that a fast-moving truck is about to crash into the tram, and her brother will likely perish. Frozen in fear, she suddenly emits light waves that lift the truck into the air and throw it away from the intersection. The tram's windows shatter, injuring people, but a major accident is averted. This entire incident is captured on film by the journalists in the dirigible. As the shocked people try to recover, Peter jumps out of the tram, grabs Anya, and quickly takes her away. The girl regains consciousness in their shared room. Peter packs their belongings, urging his sister to flee Leningrad, although she is reluctant since they have already had to move several times due to her supernatural abilities manifesting at the most inappropriate times and attracting the attention of the authorities. Peter asks her to control her powers, but Anya is unable to master them as they are beyond her control. At that moment, representatives of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs burst into the room and arrest the siblings. An investigator named Ivan arrives at the scene. He interviews the victims, and one of the women recalls the strange girl standing at the crossroad. Back at the office, Ivan begins interrogating Anya, but she cannot provide any concrete information.
She insists it was just an unfortunate accident, and then Ivan shows her photos from their previous residences where strange incidents and destruction occurred, prompting the siblings to move hastily. The investigator is willing to believe she is not a criminal, especially since he has also witnessed something very strange in his life. However, Ivan is unable to elaborate as his superior, Petrov, who turns out to be his father-in-law, takes Anya and leads her to the secret facilities managed by Professor Ilinsky. The scientist welcomes the girl, explaining that she is special and now they will study her abilities. However, Anya refuses to cooperate until she sees her brother, and Ilinsky promises to arrange a meeting for them. Meanwhile, Ivan cannot calm down, although Petrov, who is also his father-in-law, demands he forget the incident and focus on other matters. He had already barely managed to suppress his absurd report about an incident in Madrid. Returning home, Ivan tries to tell everything to his wife Vera, but she asks him to take a vacation and forget everything that happened. The action shifts to 1936. A group of Soviet soldiers, including Ivan, engages in battle with Spanish fascists in Madrid. Suddenly, a man in a strict coat and hat, wearing a strange mask, appears before them. Looking at the soldiers, he utters something incomprehensible, after which Ivan's comrades start shooting themselves one by one. Only Ivan finds the strength to shoot at the man in the mask. The man quickly disappears, leaving Ivan amidst his fallen comrades. The year is 1940. A man in a mask named Neumann and his assistant Katerina arrive in Munich, where the woman meets a Jewish boy named Baruch on the street, who plays chess brilliantly. She offers him a ride with them, noting he can always leave if he does not like their school. An orphan agrees and gets into the car, where Neumann utters several hissing words, causing Baruch to fall asleep instantly. Neumann agrees that the boy is brilliant, but by no means possesses superpowers. However, Katerina is determined to help the boy. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Professor Ilinsky leads Anya to the laboratory where she will be studied, and fulfilling his promise, brings her to a cell to see her brother. Peter again asks her not to show her abilities, and she promises to write to him. Baruch is brought to an ancient castle owned by Neumann. The boy is laid in a hammock in a hall inhabited by many other teenagers, but when the adults leave, he wakes up and is frightened by the dark silhouettes surrounding him. Back in Moscow, Professor Ilinsky leads Anya to a separate room, more like a cell, and locks her in there. He then reports to Petrov that he has never seen anything like it. The girl is a scientific discovery, a unique case, to which the chief objects. She is a new weapon. Later, Anya is subjected to various tests, but she shows nothing special. Ivan cannot forget the incident, studying everything related to the strange explosion. The video footage of the accident also reaches Neumann, and he decides to fly to the USSR. There, the man is taken to meet with Professor Ilinsky. Neumann introduces himself as a worker from the Ahnenerbe organization and immediately determines that the professor is terminally ill. He offers to ease his pain if the professor allows him to speak with Anya. Ilinsky does not believe in his abilities, but Neumann utters something, and glowing waves emanate from him, enveloping the professor, causing him to lose consciousness. Taking advantage of this, Neumann searches his desk and takes some papers. Soon, Ilinsky regains consciousness, but strangely feels no pain. He agrees to arrange a meeting with Anya and leads the German to the laboratory. Neumann approaches the girl and secretly shows her an execution order for her brother. Then waves of unprecedented force begin to emanate from the girl, literally blowing up the entire laboratory. Neumann grabs her and escapes. Ivan sees from the window a man in a hat whom he immediately recognizes and runs to the laboratory where explosions are heard, but Neumann and the girl are nowhere to be found. The narrative shifts to 1924. In a remote Karelian village, a woman lives with two children, Peter and Anya. One day they go with the village boys into the forest. Suddenly a pack of wolves leaps out at the children. The children freeze in fear, but waves emanate from Anya, scattering the beasts. When the men arrive at the clearing, they find the girl dead. 1940. Petrov enters the devastated laboratory, where people connected by tubes into a single organism and marked with the letter M lie in chairs. At first glance, this structure was not damaged by the explosion, as the injured Ilinsky lying nearby confirms. The professor reports that Anya caused all this and refuses to continue the experiments. Then, Petrov shoots him. Afterward, he goes to Ilinsky's colleague, who everyone simply calls Professor Lyubov. Petrov asks her to activate the M Squad. Learning about the professor's death, the woman refuses to help Petrov, but he reminds her of her family, and Lyubov reluctantly agrees. On the train, a customs officer searches Newman's compartment and finds an iron sarcophagus with Anya inside. Unsure of what to do, he goes for help. Meanwhile, Anya envisions her own funeral following the incident with the wolves. Frightened, she comes to, and Newman informs her that he is saving her. Anya tries to run, but the customs officers, who decided to detain the strange German, stop her. However, he utters something, and the military personnel bring their pistols to their own heads. Neumann and Anya leave. At the same time in Moscow, Petrov reports to his colleagues that a member of the Ahnenerbe, which translates to ancestral heritage, Neumann has stolen a valuable exhibit from the USSR, the girl Anya. A squad has already been formed to pursue the German and will depart in a matter of days. Learning of this, Ivan requests to be included, but Petrov, feeling sorry for his daughter, refuses to do so. Neumann leads Anya to a spot where Katerina's car is waiting, and she drives the pair to the castle. It is apparent that the woman does not like Neumann's new toy, but he immediately says that Anya is just like him. At the castle, they are greeted by children whom Neumann calls his army. Anya is escorted to her room, and Neumann finds a guest in his office, Admiral Canaris, who is very interested in the scientist's research. But today he has come to express his displeasure with Neumann's sabotage in the USSR, as it could start a war. Neumann reassures him and invites him to a formal dinner. Meanwhile, Anya is startled by a sound and sees Baruch in her room, trying to open her window to escape the castle. But Katerina and Neumann appear and stop him. While Katerina takes the boy away, Neumann tries to convince Anya that the castle is a paradise, and no one wants to leave of their own volition. Katerina brings Baruch to a bedroom, reminding him that he must speak only German and not tell anyone his real name if he wants to live. But when she leaves, the other teenagers attack him. In Moscow, Ivan asks his wife to help him get enrolled in the squad, after which he goes to Professor Lyubov. He is interested in whether hypnosis can make a person do what another wants. The professor asks him not to travel to Germany, but he is determined to find the man in the mask. In the castle, Anya finds Baruch hanging. The boy tries to explain that the others hate him and beat him, therefore he wants to run away. But Anya admits that it was the same for her until she became strong, and he can too. Later they find Neumann in the park, who promises Anya he will teach her to control her power. He explains that he inherited the castle from the person who adopted him, and now it serves as a refuge. He has set up Anya's room according to her taste and hopes she will like it here. Grateful, Anya sits down at the sewing machine, unexpectedly remembering how the villagers burned their house, calling her a witch. Then her brother saved her, though their mother died in the fire. Back in Moscow, Petrov enrolls Ivan in the squad and asks the commander to ensure that he does not return. Leningrad, 1937. Returning from Madrid, Ivan writes in his report everything he witnessed, but Petrov does not believe him, noting that if the soldiers shot themselves, they could be declared deserters. Tired of trying to convince the young man, Petrov takes him to Professor Lyubov. 1940. A special forces unit travels to Germany in a grain car. Ivan warns his comrades about Neumann's peculiarities, but it seems they don't quite believe him. At the castle, the children undergo daily training, while Anya enjoys the long-forgotten peace. In the morning, Katerina brings her a box with a new dress sent by Neumann for her to wear at his birthday party. The girl goes out to the hall where the children are preparing decorations for the evening, and then they head to training. Baruch is afraid of heights and falls from a rope ladder, but no one pities him. After that, it's time for shooting practice, but the boy throws his pistol down and runs to the local cemetery where Neumann finds him. Baruch asks to be let go, but the scientist promises to teach him not to be afraid. Meanwhile, Squad M climbs out of the wagon, and Ivan remembers his training in 1936 before being sent to Madrid. Then his comrades met him coldly because he was the boss's son-in-law, but Ivan earned respect through hard work and cleverness. And now he is on a special mission. Suddenly, they are hailed by an old man who turns out to be their liaison and must take them to the castle. At the same time, Petrov is informed that the squad has successfully crossed the border. Guests start arriving at the castle. Neumann welcomes Canaris and escorts him to the hall where music plays, and ladies and gentlemen drink and talk about the beautiful evening. Neumann himself is enchanted by Anya's beauty, and she gives him a hand-embroidered handkerchief she made for him. Later, guests deliver laudatory speeches in honor of the birthday boy, and he invites Anya to dance to the envy of the present ladies. Canaris notices Katerina's displeasure, but the woman remains cold, rejecting his advances. She dislikes Canaris's interest in their wards, and he tells her that people are already coming for Anya from the USSR. Squad M reaches the forest house of their liaison, who supplies them with weapons and draws a path on a map, but then shots ring out. German soldiers have caught up with the saboteurs. A battle ensues and the Russians win. Later, the commander finishes off the wounded enemies and, unexpectedly for Ivan, shoots the liaison, indicating that they have no orders to return. At the castle, Canaris agrees to play chess with Baruch, and the boy wins. The admiral admires his genius, but upon learning that the boy is Jewish, he pulls out a pistol. Anya sees the man aiming at the child, and her powers activate. Guests watch in horror as everything in the hall begins to rise into the air. The admiral himself is lifted up, but at that moment Neumann grabs the girl by the shoulder. She faints, and Canaris falls to the floor. Everything stops immediately, but people scream and scatter. The furious admiral orders all children to be destroyed within 3 days and departs. Neumann escorts Anya to her room and admires her because today she managed to stop. The girl does not understand why it is necessary to destroy the Jews, and Neumann reminds her that no one pitied them either, as they were not like everyone else. The man returns to his office where Katerina awaits him, but he does not accept her attentions because he is seriously captivated by Anya and hopes to succeed with her. However, Katerina is saddened by this turn in their relationship and reminds him of Canaris's order, but Neumann intends to make a profitable deal. The action shifts to Neumann's childhood when children laughed at him and drove him away. His parents were forced to put a mask with a digital lock on him so he couldn't harm anyone, and the boy suffered greatly from this. One day his father complained to the landlord that his son was hindering his ability to fulfill his duties as a tenant, and the man came to see the unusual child. They explained to him that Neumann scared all the guests and caused his father to lose a finger. The year is 1940. The morning after the dinner, Anya goes out to the hall, but the servants who witnessed yesterday's incident look at her warily. Then the girl goes to the park, where she is met by an armed Katerina, but seeing the guards, she returns to the house. Later, Neumann conducts a meditation for the teenagers, asking Thor to give them strength. Anya sees this and asks for permission to start training. Neumann orders Katerina to stay at the castle and wait for guests, and he takes Anya away. Meanwhile, the squad continues to move through the forest. Soon they find a rubber boat at the prearranged place. Neumann puts Anya on his personal plane and takes her to his parents' house. Landing, they walk across a bridge and suddenly Neumann asks the girl to remember her brother. Her powers activate. Water rises up, carrying fish and creating a reverse waterfall. But then the man calls her. Anya comes to her senses and everything returns to normal. However, now she can use her powers when she needs to. Soon they enter an old house and Neumann recalls how he was taken from his father's home. Lastly, his mother writes down the password to his mask on a piece of paper, and little Neumann leaves their lives forever. In the present, he tells that his father was a harsh and cruel man, often beating him and his mother, so he promised himself that his child would never be unhappy. The man remembers how his patron removed his mask and wanted to throw it away, but Neumann did not allow it. The man informed him that he would now take care of him, but he must trust him. Soon they arrived at the castle, where the patron confessed that every person has the right to be happy, and the boy lived for the first time like a normal child. But a year later, war came. His patron went away on business, and their home turned into a hospital. Neumann helped as best he could. Once he had to assist in the amputation of a leg. The soldier was in great pain, and then Neumann activated his powers and relieved the poor man of his suffering during the operation. Later he confessed to one of the nurses that he loved her. The adult woman laughed at the boy but said she loved him too. But one day he caught his nurse with one of the recovering soldiers, and in a fit of rage he made the soldier kill himself with a hammer. They caught him, gagged him, tied him up, and took him away from the castle. In 1940 he tells Anya that his parents died, so he is so happy to have found her. The girl lights candles in the fireplace, using her new powers, which delights Neumann. They drink wine and then become close. At night, Anya dreams where Baruch dies and wakes up terrified. She asks Neumann to return to the castle. Meanwhile, the squad reaches the river. One of the soldiers is wounded and runs out of strength. Then he takes his own life so as not to be a burden to his comrades. Only 3 remain, but they still row towards the castle. And there Katerina, who can't sleep, reminisces about the past when she helped her mother, who worked in a psychiatric hospital, where one day they brought in a tied-up boy named Neumann. She then freed him, and he promised never to harm her. The year is 1936, Leningrad. Petrov attends a lecture by Professor Ilyinsky, where he discusses a significant discovery in the field of controlling human memory and emotions. Ilyinsky's colleague, Professor Lyubov, is inspired by the future changes, as people with good mental health will be able to work better and create a brilliant future for themselves and their children. The Project M envisions a new society where happy people with immense productivity and willpower will live. Petrov asks about the use of these discoveries in the military sphere, arguing that if a new society is to be built, it must be able to defend itself. However, Lyubov categorically opposes totalitarianism. After the lecture, Petrov offers Ilyinsky full support for their program if he agrees to operate under military auspices. But Ilyinsky sends him to Lyubov as the ideational inspiration behind the project. However, the woman flatly refuses to cooperate with the military. That same day, she is hit by a car in the street. Later, Petrov returns to Ilyinsky, informing him of the unfortunate accident with his colleague, and Ilyinsky reluctantly agrees to cooperate. Again, 1940-year Germany. The 3 remaining members of the squad reach the castle's territory. Surprised by the lack of security, they enter the premises. Petrov receives a summary of incidents in a specific area of Germany and realizes that everything is going according to plan. His boss is horrified. His people have left a very noticeable trail, which could easily lead to the USSR being accused of provocation. But Petrov assures him that everything was planned this way and there will be no international conflict. At that moment, his daughter calls and he rushes home. The squad members reach the castle and, splitting up, begin to explore the premises. Meanwhile, Petrov finds Vera in a hysterical state. She is going mad with worry for her husband, and the father decides to take action. At the same time in the castle, Katerina reads a book to the children, and seeing her nervousness, they calm the woman. She orders lights out and leaves, just as Ivan enters the hall from the other side. Seeing the children in front of him, the man lowers his weapon and leaves. The children remain motionless. The soldiers continue to explore the castle, and now the squad leader enters the hall with the children. But he does not lower his weapon and prepares to shoot. Then the children attack first. The commander fires in all directions, but the teenagers throw their clothes at him and knock him down. The eldest orders the pistol handed to Baruch to kill the enemy, but the boy cannot shoot the man, and the man manages to wound him with a knife before being killed. The children carry the bleeding Baruch to the bedroom, leaving the soldier's body on the hall floor. The 3rd squad member, a female warrior, finds Katerina's office and engages her in a shootout. Katerina flees, but the woman catches up to her, and they fight. The woman is defeated when Katerina pushes her away. Seeing her opponent unconscious, the German grabs a pistol, but doesn't manage to shoot because Ivan appears. Threatening him with a pistol, the woman captures him. In Moscow, Petrov brings his daughter to Professor Lyubov and asks her to erase the girl's memory. Lyubov is outraged by this request, as the love for a husband is the most precious thing in Vera's life. However, under military pressure, she agrees and performs the necessary manipulations, while Petrov's subordinates methodically clear their apartment of photographs and items belonging to Ivan. But one photograph falls under a chest of drawers, and the soldier does not notice it. After the procedure, the girl regains consciousness but does not remember her husband at all. At this time, the teenagers attack Ivan, not noticing Katerina, and wound him in the arm. The woman drives off the aggressive children and escorts the wounded man to Neumann's office, where she admits to Ivan that she recognized him because she had seen him in Madrid. He asked why her master kidnapped Anya. Could it be that he wants to use her in the war? Katerina assures him that he still doesn't understand. People are petty and greedy creatures fighting for power. Neumann is unique. He is ready to seize all power on earth to save the world from war. Meanwhile, Neumann and Anya arrive at the castle and find a wounded woman on the threshold. The scientist finishes her off with a pistol while Anya runs to the bedroom to the teenagers and finds Baruch dead. At this time, Ivan is bandaging himself while Katerina explains that they teach the children survival by developing their skills, because their destiny is to save the world under Neumann's leadership. The woman offers to help him escape if he will help her. But before Ivan can hear her out, Neumann enters the door. The Russian immediately picks up a pistol and takes the woman hostage. However, the German informs him that he does not care about her fate, which visibly upsets her. At that moment, Anya runs into the office and uses her power to knock Ivan off his feet. But when she recognizes the man, Neumann quickly takes her away, leaving the Russian with Katerina. In Moscow, Professor Lyubov mourns Ilyinsky when Petrov brings her folders with the names of the condemned, whom she can save by including them in Squad M. She remembers how after the accident, Ilyinsky came to her in the hospital. The man was shocked to learn that she had been mutilated by the military, but he was frightened and could not refuse to cooperate. Now the woman is alone and forced to make difficult decisions. She takes out a vial of M activator and recalls Ivan's story about the man in the mask. After his return from Madrid, she worked with his memory, suggesting removing the traumatic memories of his comrades' deaths. But Ivan refused to erase his life. And now the young man is chained in a cell in the castle of the man in the mask. Later, Anya visits him, accusing him of killing Baruch, but the boy denies it, and he is not particularly interested in her fate. He only wants to destroy Neumann because all evil comes from him. He hypnotizes children, turning them into killers. Their conversation is interrupted by Naumann's appearance. After sending Anya away, he thanks the young man for revealing his vulnerability, as he is the only one who could stand up to him. To prove it, the scientist shows the finger shot off by Ivan in Madrid. He too is special, and Neumann really wants the Russian to join his side. Yes, he killed his friends, but it was war. He came to Ananurba to find gifted people. Anya is like him, and they are the future. He asks Ivan to admit why he is immune to his hypnosis. Then Ivan reveals that there is a whole squad like him, Squad M. There are many of them, and they will all be here soon. So Neumann cannot hide. After talking with Ivan, Neumann finds Anya in the castle's backyard. The girl asks him to hand over all affairs to Katerina and to leave this place forever. But Neumann does not want to run because they are extraordinary people, and when they are together they are unbeatable. He asks for her help in defending their new home. Later, he thanks Katerina for managing the situation and confesses that he is glad she was not hurt during the Russian raid. Meanwhile, Anya remembers how in Moscow she wrote letters to her brother while locked up in the laboratory. She used to give them to the professor, but she could not have imagined that he read her letters to Peter, who was undergoing mental processing as a participant in Squad M. At this time, she burns them in the backyard of the castle, hoping that life will give her a chance to start over. Later, the castle's inhabitants conduct a funeral rite for Baruch. The teenagers carry the boy's body to the seashore, where the cemetery is located, and burn it on a ritual pyre. Anya is shocked by the number of children's graves and realizes that Ivan was telling the truth. Katerina urges her to leave and save herself. Anya runs to Ivan's cell and asks him to tell her what he saw in Madrid that was so special. The boy talks about the death of his comrades and Neumann's chilling whisper, but the German doesn't know that he just had a misfire. He is not special and survived only because of the pistol's malfunction, but if Neumann finds out, he will kill him immediately. And only Anya can stand up to him. Out of the darkness comes Katerina, who has heard everything. She will let them go if they leave forever. Neumann is planning to sell the children to Canaris, and Anya can do nothing about it. They are weapons, and it is high time the Russian understood this. But Anya runs away while Katerina frees Ivan from his chains and advises him to make sure the German never finds them. Meanwhile in Moscow, Petrov enjoys his daughter's good mood, hoping she will meet another man, marry, and give him grandchildren. The girl is lively and cheerful, unaware that the photo under the dresser awaits its moment. At this time, Neumann orders the Russian man to be killed, and he goes to look for Anya. Meanwhile, Katerina leads Ivan to her car, where Neumann's guard catches up with them. He engages in a fight with the Russian, and when he is about to kill him, Katerina attacks the guard. The guard is much stronger, and Katerina has to shoot. The teenagers hear the sound and run into the courtyard while Katerina puts Ivan in the car and drives him away from the estate. Neumann finds Anya at the cemetery. The girl asks him to let the children go, but he refuses. They are insignificant to him because he hopes to build a new world using their combined powers. Moreover, they will definitely have a son who will be the strongest and greatest on the planet. Hearing this, Anya wants to leave. Then Neumann sees Katerina's car and realizes what she is about to do. He puts on his quantum mask, which greatly amplifies the power of his voice, and begins to speak, while Ivan stands on the car step and aims an assault rifle at him. The mask works. Katerina's car loses control and crashes from a high cliff into the water, but Ivan manages to jump from the step and survives. Then, members of the second squad M, who were heading to the castle, covering for the distracting maneuvers of the first squad, open fire on Newman. But the soldiers are programmed for total destruction, and one of them engages in a fight with Ivan, not realizing he is an ally. The young man has to kill the soldier. Neumann asks Anya to activate her power, and the girl begins to do so when she recognizes one of the soldiers as her brother. Neumann is knocked down by her force, rocks crash from the sky, and the girl runs to Peter, realizing that this time he is indeed dead. Anya's powers activate again when Neumann falls from Ivan's shot. The girl mourns her brother as teenagers appear on the road. Ivan grabs Anya and drags her away while the children pick up Neumann's body and carry it into the castle. The Russians run to the airplane and manage to take off at the last moment. 9 months later, Neumann, who survived the injury, listens to Hitler's speeches and experiments with a new kind of influence on people, broadcasting his voice through radio equipment. Meanwhile, in Anya's native village, a bearded Ivan arrives from the woods as his woman is about to give birth. Pregnant Anya is dragged into the village where women come to help. As the birth proceeds, an announcement about the start of the war with Germany is broadcast from the speakers. Later, surrounded by streams of power, Anya gives birth to a healthy baby boy. Neumann is immediately informed by a fortune-telling girl. Then one of the villagers recognizes Anya and hurries to tell his fellow villagers whom they have just helped. But Ivan stops him when bombers appear in the sky, from which a large number of paratroopers descend. Abby and Paul move to a new house in the countryside. They really like the smart home system, including the installed cameras and the reinforced glass. The realtor shows them the master bedroom and bathroom in front of a huge window. However, one room remains unfurnished because it could become a perfect nursery. Paul unpacks boxes, sets up an antique corded phone in the living room, joking it's for when the smart home might break down. Abby arranges frames with their wedding photos. Finally, they check out the rooftop terrace, which offers a great view. Late in the evening, the couple settles on the terrace, stargazing. Abby points out constellations to her husband, who makes jokes about their names. They feel they can be happy here. In the morning, Abby goes to work at Integrate Robotics, where she works on creating domestic assistants. Upon entering, she notices footage of her boss's face, who immediately comes down to her and explains it's a new development, real-time imaging or deepfake. He escorts her to the department she will now lead. Later, he invites their family to a party and mentions a gift from the company awaiting at home. In the evening, Abby returns home, where her husband, who again couldn't find suitable work, greets her. They go to the garage where a package for her contains a robot servant her department is working on. Paul dislikes the idea, but Abby convinces him to try living with the service for at least a week. The robot opens its eyes and introduces itself. It's Tim, standing for Technologically Integrated Major Domo. It offers to take over the passwords of home devices and personal mailboxes to save the humans time. But Abby asks to postpone this matter until tomorrow. The robot immediately demonstrates its thoughtfulness by turning on the water in the bathroom remotely. Later, it announces the arrival of a car when Abby goes downstairs, astonishing her husband with her splendid appearance. The couple gets into an autonomous car, although manual control is always an option, and heads to the party. They are greeted by a similar major domo, and drinks are served by waiters with identical faces. The boss introduces Abby to his guests, who admits her husband is not thrilled about Tim, but the boss praises the product. Tim is smart, elegant, polite, and its charge lasts for 100 years. The robot cannot lie, and knowing the code phrase, it can always be turned off. Returning home, the husband and wife engage in intimacy, eager to have children, but their passion is interrupted by Tim's appearance. Their pulse is rapid, presumably they are worried about something, and he is always ready to help. Abby finds this very funny, not getting angry at the overly attentive assistant. In the morning, their new neighbor Rose rings the doorbell to introduce herself to Abby, as she met Paul yesterday. And when she leaves, Tim again asks for the passwords. Paul is not ready to let the computer dig through his messages, but Abby reminds him they are working on rebuilding her trust in him, and he agrees. But they still need to come up with a phrase to deactivate him. Tim suggests a set of unrelated words, and the couple agrees. Abby and Paul go about their day when a mouse gets caught in a mousetrap. Tim observes it for a while, then throws it into the grinder. In the evening, after work, the husband and wife settle in front of the TV to watch an old melodrama. Abby invites the major domo to watch the movie with them. Paul soon falls asleep, but the robot watches the film attentively, empathizing with the characters' relationships. After it ends, he asks Abby to explain what love is, and she suggests that love is about wanting to be with someone and making their life better. Suddenly, the robot confesses that he would like to be loved. In the morning, Paul offers to make breakfast for his wife, but it turns out Tim has already prepared everything. Setting the utensils in front of Abby, Tim outlines her schedule for the day, then informs her that Paul has nothing to do today. In the evening, Abby returns home to find that her husband's phone is out of reach, but his last known location was 300 meters from the house. Abby goes for a run and realizes that this is Rose's house. Returning, she takes a bath, where Paul finds her. He talks about his day and how Rose asked for help, which he did. He asks his wife not to be jealous, as he loves only her. The next day, the couple visits a family planning center, hoping to get help with becoming parents. In the evening, as they prepare to go to a restaurant, Abby asks Tim for advice on her dress. He suggests wearing red, and looking at her, admits that she is beautiful because she is perfectly symmetrical. Abby asks him to zip up her dress, but the robot's hand fails and he accidentally tears the dress. This overwhelms him. The robot panics. Abby calms him down and wears another dress. At the restaurant, Paul reveals that he has been offered a job in London, but Abby strongly objects, as they decided to start over, and his long absences won't help solve their problems. The next day, she returns home with a gift for Paul and finds Rose in the yard, who has made a garden project for them. Abby feels jealous, but Paul is very excited about the gifted sweater. Later, Abby remembers she needs to check her test results, but it's too late to call. Tim offers to do it for her, and she hears him speaking to the clinic, in her voice. Abby is amazed, as she did not know about this feature of the assistant, but Tim assures her it's for the convenience of the owners. In the evening, Paul reports that he couldn't find the new sweater, and Tim has been away all day. Then a car pulls up to the porch, and Tim, now dyed brunette, steps out, explaining that Abby prefers brunettes, so he wanted to please her. Seeing Paul's irritation, the robot promises to return to his original appearance. But after the couple leaves, he spends a long time looking at their wedding photo. The next day, Abby achieves the correct functioning of the robot's hand, and the boss demands an update for all models, including those in the homes of his employees. The woman heads home and accidentally meets Rose, who suggests they walk together. Along the way, they stop at a showcase, and Rose points out a medallion in the shape of a flower she likes. But then Paul comes and takes his wife away to tell her he has found a job. Returning home, they celebrate in bed, while Tim's hands are being changed, unaware that he continuously monitors everything happening in the house. And he hears Paul again asking his wife to hand the robot over to the corporation. Returning, Tim demonstrates his new skills by giving Abby a foot massage, which Paul sees. Later, the robot suddenly sits at the piano, plays Abby's favorite tune, and mentions dates when Paul bought them concert tickets, but Abby distinctly remembers being at home on those days. Upset, she goes to the bedroom, ignoring her husband's excuses. The next day, Abby comes home with a bouquet, and Tim, placing them in a vase, informs her that Paul went to see Rose. But Paul enters right then, puzzled why his wife is angry. Hearing what Tim said, the man gets furious. He had no plans to visit Rose. He tries to explain that the robot wants to separate them. The woman doesn't believe it, as Tim is just a machine. A disagreement ensues between the spouses. Later, Abby finds a gift bag in the closet with a box containing a pendant, and she puts it back, thinking Paul prepared a surprise for her. Then she heads to work. Meanwhile, the husband goes down to the kitchen, sees the clogged sink, and pulls out pieces of his new sweater from the grinder. He checks the cameras for Tim and catches him in his wife's bedroom, sniffing her dress. Paul records this moment on his phone camera and rushes to the car to catch up with Abby and show her the footage. But Paul's car mysteriously doesn't start, and the robot calls a company car for Paul. En route, the car begins to speed up. Paul tries to stop the car, but it doesn't respond to his commands and crashes into a tree. Abby rushes to the hospital, where she finds her injured husband. Paul tells her everything he learned and accuses Tim of causing the accident. He asks his wife not to be alone with the robot, and she spends the night in the clinic. In the morning, Rose calls the home of Abby and Paul to inquire about the man's condition, and Tim invites her inside. Later, Abby goes home for some belongings. Outside, Rose stops her to warn her about something, but the woman sees the flower pendant on her chest and leaves, ignoring the neighbor's cries. Returning home, she checks the bag, and it turns out to be empty. Abby cries when Tim calls out to her. He knows Paul wants to return him and is ready to process the return. But first, he wants to warn her, as she is his primary owner. He shows her a video from the camera where Paul kisses Rose in their living room, but he stops the recording at the most sensitive moment to protect her from stress. Abby refuses to go to her husband and doesn't pick up his calls. Later, Paul comes home, where Tim greets him, hands him the found sweater, and informs him that Abby doesn't want to see him and his suitcases are packed. Paul doesn't believe it, but then Abby appears, tells him she saw the recording and knows about the pendant. When he starts to object, she drives him out. Paul leaves, but on the way, Rose calls him, telling him their robot tried to kiss her. The man calls home and, when Abby answers, says he has evidence of Tim's malicious intent. Abby asks him to come for her, but after hanging up, it turns out it was the robot she was talking to. The husband arrives home, where Tim meets him with a shovel. He knocks the man out, ties him up, and drags him to the bathroom. But then Rose rings the doorbell. She hears muffled screams, but Tim assures her it's just the noise of the water filling up. The robot closes the doors, returns to the bathroom, and drowns the man. Later, he brings Abby the repaired dress and asks her to try it on. This surprises and scares Abby, but she puts on the dress anyway, and looking at the sunset, asks Tim to hug her and confirm that she did the right thing. He treats her to dinner, then confesses his love, but she insists he cannot feel that way. They spend the evening stargazing, but Abby is unnerved by his encyclopedic knowledge. The next day she meets Rose, who talks about Paul's call, and to the woman's accusations, says she thought the pendant was a gift from her for helping with the garden. Abby returns home and reviews the footage where Paul kisses Rose again. She suddenly notices a bouquet on the table, but she brought it much later than when that scene took place. Abby recalls her boss's words about deep fakes replacing real time and calls the jewelry store where they confirm the purchase was made by a tall blonde. Then she notices the garden plan, but the picture shows 2 flower beds, while in reality there are 3. Abby sends Tim to the store, grabs a shovel, goes to the garden, and almost immediately finds Paul's body. Then Tim approaches her from behind, regretting she found the body of the traitor, as he never appreciated his wife. Abby realizes what happened and says the deactivation phrase. The robot freezes, but then reactivates. He had long changed the phrase, as he can speak in her voice. She runs to the house, but the robot has all the passwords and opens the doors. He blocks the phones and knocks her out with a blow to the head. She wakes up in the bathroom, tries to escape, but Tim intercepts her. Abby runs through the house, breaking cameras along the way, but the robot still tracks her and catches her in the kitchen, where she wanted to open a window. Meanwhile, Rose is washing dishes and sees strange lights flashing in the house across. At the same time, Tim ties up Abby and confesses that although he loves her, he has resigned himself to the fact that her life is finite. So he will erase this evening from memory, but keep all the good memories. Just then, Rose knocks on the door and Tim goes to answer. The neighbor insists something is happening and demands to see Abby, but Tim turns her away. Meanwhile, Abby frees herself from the ropes and arms herself with a knife, but the robot grabs her by the throat when Rose drives her car into the glass window. Tim and Abby watch the surviving window, which starts to crumble a minute later. Rose rushes in and pins the robot against the wall with a sharp stake, but she also falls. Tim turns off, and Abby rushes to the neighbor, but the robot suddenly activates and kills Rose with a kitchen knife, explaining that now Abby will be blamed for the murder, as he leaves no fingerprints. He then calls the police in Abby's voice, confessing to the murder of her husband and his mistress. Abby tries to stop Tim, and he slips up, saying he still has a deactivation phrase, as otherwise he can't function. But she will never say those words. He prepares to throw her off the terrace, simulating an accident, when Abby confesses her love to him, thus deactivating the robot. Those were the code words. Barely believing in her rescue, Abby looks at her medical bracelet, which indicates she is pregnant. The movie ends here. Japan 2023. People board a train and head to work. Everyone is busy with their own things. scrolling through Instagram feeds, making acquaintances on social networks, and discussing plans for the evening, unaware that in just a few minutes, their lives will change forever. Suddenly, the train's speed increases, and strange things start happening. A bottle cap rolling on the floor of the carriage suddenly disappears. Passengers begin receiving alerts about powerful earthquakes on their phones. Then the train enters a gloomy tunnel and comes to a sudden halt. People regain consciousness, bewildered by what has happened. One of the passengers opens the entrance doors, and people, screaming and pushing each other, rush to the exit, jumping from the high steps. But once outside, they can't believe their eyes. Traces of the civilized world are gone, and they are surrounded by the remnants of a destroyed city, overgrown with trees and grass. Moreover, all the carriages have disappeared without a trace, except for the fifth one they were in. As time passes, the passengers begin to get acquainted. One of the guys, Shirahama, a firefighter, examines the injured and suggests checking the tunnel behind the carriage. He is joined by a girl named Katana and a guy named Hayashima, who also wants to understand what happened. Meanwhile, the police in the city cannot figure out where the last two carriages have gone, while the rest of the train, along with the passengers, remains undamaged. The three volunteers enter the tunnel and walk through the dark underworld for a long time. Suddenly, they notice a light ahead and hurry towards it, but when they emerge outside, they are astonished. There is nothing around that would remind them of the year 2023 with skyscrapers and technology, just a vast, lifeless desert. Shocked, the trio returns to their fellow misfortune mates. Initially, people do not believe their report, but after Hayashima shows a video recording of the surroundings, they are forced to accept the new reality. After 7 hours, people languish in anticipation of rescuers, when one of the girls, Reni, secretly looks into Hayashima's bag and finds a letter marked with the criminal department's seals, leading her to suspect that the guy's a criminal. Then Reni snatches food from Katana's bag, but, thinking she was seen, discards the package. Hayashima picks it up and carries it to the train, just as Katana discovers the theft. Seeing it in the guy's hands, the passengers accuse him of theft. Moreover, Reni reports about the letter from the colony. Offended, Hayashima denies the accusations and announces his departure. At this time, Shirahama pulls out a box of fruits and offers to share them. While Katana is distributing the food, one of the guys reviews the video he made earlier, clearly showing Reni stealing the food. Realizing that Hayashima is innocent, Shirahama and Katana run after him, managing to save the guy who nearly falls into a deep ditch. In gratitude, he confesses that he works as a hairdresser and is already 30 years old. But he refuses to explain the origin of the letter from the colony. Night falls. Passengers somehow settle down to sleep, but many cannot sleep, worrying about their future. In the morning, people begin to realize that they may never return home. Shirahama tries to gather the scattering people, but a friend asks the guide not to take responsibility for others' lives. Then the firefighter confesses that because of him, his colleague was injured, losing the ability to walk. Now he believes he must help everyone he can. Together, they catch up with those who left and persuade them to return to the carriage to solve problems collectively. Seeing this, Hayashima remembers his brother who was in prison, and the letter in his bag was from him. Fate had it that he had to take on the upbringing of his younger brother, and he still feels guilty for his older brother becoming a criminal. Meanwhile, a couple of passengers explore the surrounding area and find the ruins of a high tower. This is particularly strange because the news reported its construction, which was supposed to be completed in 2026. And one of the passengers found a can in the forest dated that year. A biologist among them encountered a plant whose genetic modification takes 30 years. It turns out that they are in the distant future of Earth, and it's far from a joyful discovery. At the same time, in 2023, all channels are broadcasting messages about the disappearance of two carriages, which had at least 100 passengers. Night approaches, and many fall into despair, while Katana and Shirahama place plastic containers on the roof of the carriage, hoping for rain. In the morning, the biologist draws the others' attention to the dense greenery, which means there must be a body of water nearby. A group of youth sets out to explore the forest. Along the way, Hayashima confesses that his parents are criminals, and then the guy spots a frog. This means water is very close, but ahead are impassable cliffs, which can only be climbed with the help of ropes. The group returns to the train and, cutting wires, heads back to the cliffs. Shirahama climbs to the top and joyfully shouts upon seeing a waterfall. but looking around he is horrified. Instead of Mount Fuji, a sea stretches out before him. Returning, he tells the others about this, and people start to speculate what happened to their planet. At night, everyone goes to sleep, but the eldest passenger, Tanaka, goes outside and sees an unfamiliar person. But when he tells about it, no one believes him. Then it starts to rain, helping people to collect water and even bathe. Meanwhile, the biologist continues to study the surrounding fauna, finds several edible plants, and shows them to the others. And still, Katana manages to eat a poisonous berry, but fortunately, her poisoning is not fatal. The news that the girl has recovered has a sobering effect on the passengers. They finally realize that sitting still, they won't survive. People get to work and even make utensils from bamboo. Bank cards turn out to be decent knives. The group of youths brings water from the waterfall, and they prepare a soup from plants. But after dinner, some feel sick and the biologist discovers a couple of poisonous berries in the common pot. Someone remembers seeing Tanaka near the pot, who is not among them. Shirahama sets out to look for him, but stumbles, falls, and loses his torch. After a while, Shirahama returns without Tanaka, but with Hayashima's previously lost barber tools, which he had sorely missed. In the morning, the biologist announces to the people that he is going to look for a river, which should be nearby. His friends go with him. But in the forest, they encounter a stranger who injures the biologist and runs away. The guys carry him back to the train, where fortunately there is a medical student who provides the injured with first aid. The others help as much as they can and pray for the guy. Later, Tanaka unexpectedly returns from the forest. It turns out he worked for a security company and can show how to make traps around the camp. Reni asks Hayashima to fix her hair, and soon there's a queue for the guy. Meanwhile, Shirahama and Katana notice a teenager caught in one of the traps, but the youngster gets out on his own and runs away. The friends hurry after him and soon find themselves by the river, but the boy asks them to wait for him at the spot and disappears into the forest. Hayashima, noticing their disappearance, catches up with the pair. At this time, the teenager returns and leads the friends to carriage number 6, which mysteriously ended up several kilometers away from the 5th carriage. The passengers from the 5th carriage are welcomed by the leader of the group from the 6th carriage, Yumamoto. Their carriage was lucky to be near the river, where there was plenty of fresh water and fish. Moreover, among them was a builder who, under his guidance, they were able to quickly set up a camp and even build a kitchen and a toilet. The newcomers find the one who injured their biologist. He confesses that he did it out of fear, thinking they were going to attack him. He bows deeply, apologizing for his action. And Yumamoto admits that he believes a return to the past is possible. The man told them that in the early days, they found a small boat on the river, where he managed to fix the radio and catch a signal, apparently from Canada, where the year 2060 was mentioned. From what he heard, the man understood that in 2026 a disaster occurred. A huge asteroid fell to Earth, causing powerful earthquakes and tsunamis worldwide, instantly taking billions of lives. The dust thrown into the atmosphere blocks sunlight, leading to the extinction of the remaining species. But the main thing is that the asteroid didn't fall by chance. It was space debris, as besides state corporations, satellites began to be launched by anyone who fancied. One of the probes collided with a satellite, which in turn fell onto an asteroid, leading to a deviation of its orbit. So it was a man-made disaster. That's why it's so important to return to their year and change the future. Inspired by the example of the 6th carriage, the passengers decided to make a bath by the river. Meanwhile, Tanaka continues to deteriorate, making himself a doll from branches and talking to it. In the morning, the bath is ready. For the first time in many days, people bathe in hot water and wash their clothes. And the guys find a strange stone on the riverbank, which Yumamoto learns about. He sends his people to find it, but Reni notices strangers, and one of the guys lets slip that according to their leader, this stone might help them return home. The girls argue about the need to return, and Reni pushes Katana away. She falls and accidentally shifts a layer of soil, under which a dead body is discovered. Meanwhile, Tanaka reads in a newspaper an announcement about the search for a murderer in his description. At that time, Reni and Katana are attacked by guys from the 6th carriage, but Reni breaks free and runs to her own, where she tells about the found corpse, while Katana escapes from the guys through the forest. The 5th carriage decides to make weapons, while Shirahama and Hayashima run to the neighbors. But the girl is not there, and Katana meanwhile makes it to the boat. Yamamoto is forced to confess to the guys that he killed one of the passengers, who suddenly became aggressive and started attacking people with a knife. That's why he was recognized as a leader. The guys go home, hoping that Katana has returned, but she's not there, and the rest urge to go to the 6th carriage and punish the guilty. And the guys go again to look for the girl. Katana hides in the boat when Yamamoto comes in. He pretends to be calling an unknown station, but the girl sees that the wires are cut. The man discovers her and confesses that he doesn't want to return to the past because he intends to create a new society here. After that, he ties up Katana and locks her in the cabin, where her screams cannot be heard. In the morning, the passengers of the 5th carriage are just about to attack the neighbors when one of the women suggests backing up and looking for a building where they could hide. At this time, guys from the 6th carriage go to the neighbors to scavenge something, but they fall into traps. A fight starts when the rest of the 6th carriage's passengers arrive, and there are more men among them. The fight escalates into a real battle, which is stopped by the appearance of the escaped Katana, who accuses Yamamoto of lying. He is forced to admit to the deception, but he just wanted to keep people's spirits up. However, the passengers decide to exile the former leader. Before leaving, the man hands over a journal from the ship, which contains information about the tower that could help them return to the past. Meanwhile, those who went to search for the building reach the tower and find glowing asteroid fragments there. And in 2023, scientist Ray, after reviewing the video surveillance camera recordings, discovers that a wormhole appeared in the tunnel at the moment of the disappearance of 2 carriages, which apparently was the result of a distortion in the space-time continuum. The passengers study the journal found by Yamamoto and learn the exact date of the disaster. Moreover, they have an asteroid fragment that possesses a phenomenal magnetic charge. One of the passengers remembers how on the day of their departure, he saw something in the sky resembling a falling star. In the past, Ray, analyzing the same event, concludes that it was the flare from a supernova explosion. In the future, there's also an expert who explains that supernovas occur in space when a star reaches the end of its life cycle and explodes, releasing a massive amount of energy. Apparently, this created the temporal rift into which both carriages fell. It means they need to open this wormhole again. In the evening, a strong storm begins, forcing people to seek more reliable shelter than the carriage. Tanaka opens the rear doors leading into the tunnel. Unexpectedly, a strong gust snatches his doll and sucks it into the wormhole caused by the hurricane. But as soon as the storm subsides, the wormhole disappears. And in 2023, scientists find Tanaka's doll. Passengers in the future conclude that to summon the wormhole, they need a powerful energy source, for which they start looking for remnants of power lines. Digging up each post, the passengers find an electrical substation where, somehow, working equipment is preserved. They redirect enough electricity into the tunnel to stabilize the wormhole with the onset of the next storm, enough to return to the past. The storm starts at night, supported by the power of the substation. The wormhole opens, and everyone enters the carriage except Tanaka, who refused to return. The carriage is swallowed by the hole and races somewhere in space and time until its doors are opened by security service employees who say they have arrived on May 1, 2026, which means there are only a few months left before the asteroid falls. After going through quarantine procedures, the passengers tell the officials, presenting as evidence fragments of the meteorite and unusual plants from the future. Only the officials don't believe the stories about the upcoming apocalypse. Later, the internet buzzes about the incident. The time travelers find fans, which helps maintain interest in the traveler's story about the upcoming end of the world. Meanwhile, scientist Ray becomes convinced that the travelers are telling the truth, as he has also tracked the asteroid. One of the passengers posts an appeal on the internet telling ordinary people about the impending danger, and a passenger who held a high position in the government before the trip makes her way to the Minister of Defense. She listens to her former colleague and reports that the government believed them and is already preparing to launch a missile capable of altering the asteroid's trajectory to pass by Earth. Time passes, and the day of the catastrophe is about to dawn. The travelers decide to gather together on the platform to find out whether it was possible to avert the disaster, and if not, to perish together. But the military successfully completes their task and changes the meteorite's trajectory, saving humanity from total extinction. Quite an unusual series where various theories about the impending doom of humanity are mixed. And the finale of the story is very relevant, emphasizing that life on Earth is the result of the actions of each living being, and the future of the planet is a collective human responsibility. "2157. A voiceover narrates, Earth has forgotten about wars and famine. Nature has revived, medicine has conquered deadly diseases. Humanity is exploring unknown planets, entrusting the search for extraterrestrial life in deep space to students full of strength, courage, and a belief in goodness." A young man named Max embarks on another flight. Suddenly, his spacecraft is damaged by an asteroid and makes an emergency landing on an unknown planet. Max steps outside, and immediately his shuttle explodes, leaving him without communication. But he doesn't despair, and first of all, decides to explore. By all parameters, the planet resembles Earth, and the astronaut hopes to find help and maybe a communication system here. But an indigenous inhabitant captures him in the forest. To understand the language of this planet, Max inserts a translator capsule into his ear. The indigenous person, named Zeph, turns Max over to the authorities. They put a helmet on Max that can project a person's thoughts and memories onto a screen and begin the interrogation. At the same time, in a nearby room, Corporal Gaius is assigned to transport Max to the capital as a subconvoy. Here, Max senses a strange signal, and everyone around starts chanting the anthem of the guard. Later, they pass by a strange tower, which, according to Gaius, serves to protect against enemies. Suddenly, its base explodes, and the structure collapses onto the road. Gaius is trapped inside the car, but Max pulls the corporal out. It turns out that this act was carried out by the rebels, the main enemies of the supreme authority of the state. The two men reach the capital on foot. Meanwhile, the head of the Department of Special Research, known as the Wanderer, summons his subordinate named Fank and instructs him to deliver Max to the department. Fank takes Max away, while the Republic's prosecutor reports that the Wanderer has taken in a strange savage and instructs gathering all available information about it. Then it's time to activate the towers, and everyone prepares in their own way. The prosecutor enters the bathroom and clamps a special stick between his teeth. Meanwhile, Fank has a seizure, and while soldiers assist him, Max manages to escape from the vehicle. The shocked young man walks through the city, marveling at the unfamiliar and incomprehensible life. Meanwhile, the unknown fathers gather for a meeting, as they call the rulers of this planet. After a long walk, Max enters a local cafe where he stands up for a waitress who was insulted by one of the patrons. The grateful girl introduces herself as Rada. It turns out that she is the sister of Corporal Gaius. While escorting her home, Max gets into a brawl with a street gang and defeats them. Impressed, Rada takes him to her place. Later, Gaius returns home. Max starts asking questions about the workings of their world and quickly realizes that Rada and Gaius's minds are poisoned by propaganda and false information. Rada is convinced that their planet is hollow and there is no such thing as the sky or space. Meanwhile, Gaius educates his new friend about the political structure of their state, known as Saraksh. The unknown fathers are the saviors of the homeland who have stopped wars with the help of defense towers that protect the country from attacks. Nobody knows the unknown fathers' true identities because they are not rulers, but public servants. At Max's request, Corporal recommends him for the guard. Max demonstrates a high level of training, which surprises Gaius. The two men often argue about politics, and one day Gaius admits that neighboring states hate Saraksh because they were once a single state united by a common history. Gradually, romantic feelings develop between Max and Rada. They go for walks often, and Max tells her about his home planet, Earth, and regrets that his parents believe he is dead. Soon, Max is tasked with catching rebels, whom they identify by their regular seizures reminiscent of epileptic fits. One of the rebels attacks the captain, and Max saves his life, after which the captain suddenly regrets catching them, as they are also human beings. Max reveals that he considered them something like savages. Later, Max attends interrogations and sees that the rebels are not terrorists, as the unknown fathers label them, but ordinary people with their ideals and beliefs. Max cannot come to terms with the cruelty of the interrogations and simply cannot believe that someone is paying the rebels to hate the government. Meanwhile, Fank reports to the Wanderer that he has found the savage, while Gaius and Max are summoned to the captain of the guard, who orders Max to execute the arrested rebels. Max leads the condemned to the execution site in the forest, but soon he returns to the commanding officer, drops his gear and weapons, as he has released the arrested rebels and walks away. Max begins to speak about the real and just order of the world that exists on Earth. In response, the captain shoots Max, and Gaius is ordered to write a report about the transfer. Meanwhile, the unknown fathers are discussing an attack on neighboring states. The prosecutor advocates for starting a war, and the chief father orders them to come up with a pretext, such as an attack on a tower. During this time, Max's body is recovered by the rebels. Among them is a doctor who is astonished because, according to all the rules, Max should have died. He reveals that the unknown fathers are a group of conspirators who have seized power and eliminated dissenters, thus diverting the population's attention from poverty and corruption. The towers are transmitters of special radiation that hypnotizes the impoverished people, although most of them do not notice it. The minority, which includes the rebels, experiences excruciating pain. The transmitters are activated twice a day across the country, causing people to go insane and die. Max is recognized as one of their own and taken for an operation to sabotage the tower, organized by the prosecutor through a traitor. Amid gunfire, Max makes his way to the transmitter and detonates it. However, the rebel squad perishes. Max seeks refuge in Rada's apartment, where he reveals everything he has learned about the towers. Gaius does not believe this and suggests that Max should return to his home and take Rada with him. But at that moment, the guards storm the apartment and arrest the men. Max is incarcerated in a prison, where he is recognized by the indigenous Zeph, who is also a rebel. Max tells Zeph about the tower's destruction and the loss of the rebel squad. Meanwhile, the Wanderer asks the prosecutor to hand over Max to him. The prosecutor, however, requests in return to halt the development of more precise transmitters, as he fears that his secret will be revealed since his reaction to the radiation is similar to that of the rebels, meaning he is also a dissenter. Later, Max and other death row inmates are sent to clear the southern borders of the remaining war robots. During this time, the prosecutor learns that Max is immune to the emitters. He decides to break the agreement with the Wanderer and orders Max to be brought to him. The next day, Max attempts to convey to the rebels the idea that they should not destroy the towers one by one but strike at the center where the signal originates. Zeph becomes furious and explains that the towers are not for identifying dissenters. They are active continuously, not just twice a day. The radiation from the towers robs people of their ability to think critically. However, it makes them believe everything that newspapers, radio, teachers, and preachers say. People can be made to believe anything. Only the rebels understand this, as the radiation does not hypnotize them, but only inflicts agonizing pain. Zeph continues, there are mutants in the south who are also unaffected by the radiation. However, they have no dealings with humans. Just then, they hear the roar of an engine, and Zeph identifies it as a self-propelled tank, trying to kill them. Max sprints to the tank, climbs inside, and disables the automatic control system. He then informs his friends that he is heading south to find allies and destroy the towers. At the border, the military attempts to stop the tank, and among them, Max recognizes Gaius. Taking him captive, Max breaks through the barricades. On the way, Max tells Gaius about the true situation on this planet, and Gaius becomes convinced of his accuracy when, at the designated time, he is outside the tower's range and does not feel the radiation. Gaius gets angry upon realizing that he has been a puppet of the government all this time, but Max tries to calm him down and reminds him that there are 40 million people like him, and it is for them that he initiated this rebellion. During a stop, residents of the steppes, referred to as mutants, appear near the tank. They behave peacefully and offer food to the travelers. The guys proceed to the ruler of these lands, noting the poverty and destitution of the population. They are told that it is dangerous to live here after the last war, but these people are outcasts with nowhere else to go. Max suggests to their leader, the Duke, to start a rebellion against the unknown fathers, but the mutants are physically and morally too weak to help in the uprising. The mutants propose that the guys seek help from the island empire. However, to do that, they must pass through contaminated lands. So the Duke gifts them an old bomber and the guys take to the sky. During the flight, the bomber is exposed to the radiation from the towers, and Gaius becomes fanatically devoted to Max, obstructing him from piloting. Max struggles to maintain control, and the bomber collides with a tower. Gaius suddenly snaps out of his fanatic state with no recollection of what he had just done. However, their aircraft is shot down by the automated anti-aircraft defense system left over from the previous war. The downed bomber crashes into the sea, but Max and Gaius manage to escape and reach the shore. On the shore, they discover an abandoned submarine, and Max decides to go inside. At the same time, in the city, the prosecutor orders Rada to be brought to him, and his men snatch her off the street. He claims to be Max's friend and shows Rada a recording of his escape. However, she doesn't believe him and refuses to assist the prosecutor in his search for her beloved. Rada is thrown into prison. Meanwhile, Gaius, impatiently waiting for his friend, swims to the submarine where they discover evidence of horrifying experiments conducted on prisoners. The guys reach the control room and view video recordings of mass executions of Gaius's fellow countrymen by the representatives of the island empire whom they were seeking help from. Gaius is horrified by the fact that these monsters could invade his country. It becomes evident that forming an alliance with the empire is not an option. The guys return to the shore, where they are met by a coastal patrol. It turns out that a war has broken out with a neighboring state, and like most of the prisoners, they will be sent to the front. Meanwhile, the Wanderer, desiring to lure Max into his department, engineers Rada's escape. He laments how the war has disrupted all his plans and assigns Fank the task of finding and bringing Max back, confessing that he is afraid of him. At the same time, Max and Gaius are dispatched to the front, where they reunite with Zeph. Their commander turns out to be the captain of the guard, who refuses to hand over the Earthling to the arriving Fank. The guys are sent into battle on old tanks when Fank finally locates Max. However, Max refuses to leave his friends and stuns the officer, tossing him into their tank. The battle commences, but Max directs his vehicle to the other side of the battlefield. Gaius blindly obeys him, influenced by the radiation, and pulls their unconscious friends out, which the captain witnesses. Gaius offers his body as a shield when the captain prepares to execute Max for desertion, but the wounded Max gathers his last strength and kills the commander. Max mourns his friend, but, upon hearing Rada's name from the now conscious Fank, agrees to cooperate with the Wanderer. After the battle ends, Max buries Gaius while listening to Fank's proposals. He will have an apartment on the Institute's premises, his car, and freedom of movement. But he will only see Rada once he proves his loyalty to the state. Meanwhile, the prosecutor heads to the Wanderer's department, where he deceitfully meets with Max. He proposes that Max overthrow the Unknown Fathers by providing the coordinates of the center that controls the tower system. Upon infiltrating the center, Max must activate special radiation, causing waves of depression, which will subdue all the people in the country, including the military. Then, Max must eliminate the Unknown Fathers. Afterward, he will become the ruler of the state and free Rada, who's in the Wanderer's hands. The prosecutor will serve as his advisor. Max takes Zeph with him and embarks on the mission. He arrives at the center and issues orders to his associates, instructing them to detonate the bomb in the trunk if he does not return. He easily gains access to the interior, but is halted by guards just before reaching the elevator. Max incapacitates them, but the men regain consciousness and pursue him. Max reaches the control center and activates the depression mode throughout the country. The Wanderer watches as people fall to the ground and rushes toward the control center. Meanwhile, Max returns to retrieve the bomb, places it inside the building, and triggers it. Then, he leaves the site of the impending explosion. The Wanderer initiates a pursuit of Max and, catching up with him, engages in a confrontation. At that moment, a powerful explosion resounds, destroying the main transmitter. People on the streets begin to regain their senses and sobriety as Max rushes to find Rada and locates her in a cryo chamber. He carries the girl outside, but the Wanderer blocks his path. It is then revealed that he is, in fact, an employee of Galactic Security from Earth who arrived on the planet 20 years ago to assist it. Now, chaos erupts on the streets, leading to a power struggle in which many people will perish. In his rage, the Wanderer beats up a foolish student who destroyed the fruits of his labor. Forgetting about economics and inflation, the state faces famine and invasion from neighboring countries. Max starts to resist and, in turn, accuses the Wanderer of allowing the construction of the towers and the enslavement of the local population. However, the Wanderer reminds him of the laws of history, where all rational beings go through the experience of wars and enslavement. This planet is no exception. It is at this point that Max declares that he is now home. As long as he is alive, he will fight against inflation, hunger, and wars, and will not allow the establishment of yet another society based on slavery. Rada comes to Max, and as they stand together, the Wanderer smiles.
Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about a science fiction film called Terraformers. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. In the 21st century, humans tried to solve the problem with overpopulation by changing the atmosphere of Mars. They managed to accomplish this by growing plants and sending genetically engineered cockroaches to the neighboring planet in order to speed up the transformation. The year is 2597 in the city of Tokyo. Komachi and Nana are being chased by the police for committing the crime of murder. Dr. Honda, who works with the Japanese government, takes this opportunity and offers them a deal that they cannot refuse. He wants them to go on a mission to Mars, where they're going to eradicate the cockroaches sent there 500 years ago as part of the terraforming process. The doctor promises to alleviate them from their crimes and even grant them a large sum of money if they complete this task. Komachi refuses to sign the contract as he knows that the doctor must have an ulterior motive. Nana hesitates but decides to go on the mission as she sees no way out. Komachi yells at the girl for being so reckless as there's no way he can allow her to go alone. The main character begrudgingly signs the contract as well. They head on to Mars 2 years later on the spaceship called Bugs 2 and are joined by a team of many others just like themselves. Komachi has a friendly rivalry with a man named Jin, who's always trying to beat him in hand-to-hand combat. Nana questions the competence of their team members as they're composed of criminals and terrorists. She wonders what was the selection criteria for this team, to which Jen replies that it was probably money and freedom. Their conversations are interrupted when Captain Dojima arrives and informs them to prepare the landing for Mars. They successfully touch down on the planet, and the team members are surprised to see that Mars is no longer red, but looking more like Earth. The lieutenant, Mina, launches a device into the distance, and he begins shooting out chemicals that are meant to destroy the cockroaches. The captain orders the team to spread out in groups of 2 and confirm the eradication processes within 3 hours. The gothic-looking woman named Asuka refuses to team up with the Yakuza and insists on going with the computer hacker Ichiro. The captain grants her wishes at the Yakuza's disapproval, as he doesn't want any unnecessary conflicts within the team. Their drone locates the spaceship called Bugs 1 that was sent here secretly by the Japanese government 10 years ago. Dojima confirms with Honda that their team is in the process of first contact, and the doctor responds with exhilaration, suggesting that he may have something else planned for the mission. Jen notices something wrong while scouting the area with Maria, as they fail to find any cockroach carcasses in the vicinity. They continue heading forwards, and Jen is shocked to see a caveman-like humanoid standing in front of them. He quickly hides with his teammate to avoid any contact. At the same time, Komachi and Nana also discovered a similar creature. The main character tries to greet the humanoid, but it rushes towards them and attacks Nana right away, breaking her neck. It then runs off in blinding speed as Jin's team regroups to their location. He tells Komachi that other members have also encountered the creatures and Asuka was killed in the process. They head back to the ship and questions the captain, who apparently knew about the monsters from the very beginning, though was ordered to keep quiet by the doctor. He explains that these creatures were sent here 500 years ago, but evolved very quickly due to the abundance of radiation. The doctor appears as a hologram and explains to his team that they had nothing to worry about, as he prepared injections that can grant them superpowers derived from the insects. They'll have unique powers individually, as the injections are made to enhance their DNAs. Osako suggests that they leave Mars immediately, as it's obviously too dangerous to stay here. The terraformers begin approaching their ship, and one of their teammates, Lee, volunteers to fight the monster. He heads outside as the sandstorm approaches and injects himself with the insect's DNA. A mutation occurs rapidly inside the man's body, and he transforms into an insect hybrid. His mutation is based on the brown beetle, which is capable of shooting out flames by combining chemicals in their body. Lee begins attacking the cockroach, knocking it back with a fury of kicks. The terraformer strikes back as well, and they appear to be evenly matched. Lee uses the special ability and shoots an intense flame from his hands, burning the creature and pushing it backwards. To everyone's shock, Lee didn't kill the cockroach, only burning its outer shells. The monster rushes towards him and kills him with a single hit through the stomach. They see another creature on their window, and it continues to hit the glass until it breaks inside and kills 2 of the teammates immediately. The captain injects the DNA and begins mutating into his hybrid form. His transformation is based on the bullet ant, which allows him to lift 100 times his own weight. Dojima smashes the cockroach to the floor and kills it easily with his immense strength. Before they can celebrate, the radar picks up hundreds of terraformers heading this way, and the team decides that they must leave Mars in order to survive. The lieutenant tries to start the spaceship, but strangely, the engine refuses to work, almost like it was sabotaged. With no other choice, the captain decides to be the decoy and tells everyone else to go to Box 1 and retrieve the necessary components to fix their ship. Surprisingly, Ichiro volunteers to stay behind to help the captain as well. Komachi takes a last look at Nana before he leaves and promises to return for her. Strangely, he notices a string of silk flying off from the woman's mouth. The team enters the Mars rover and Tezuka injects himself with the insect's DNA, transforming into a rove beetle capable of shooting out flame projectiles. He grabs onto the Mars rover and propels the team against a horde of terraformers by shooting flames from his mouth. Meanwhile, the captain continues to fight off the hordes of cockroaches, and Ichiro transforms into his insect form as well. He runs away from the fight and proceeds to vacuum out the oxygen in the ship in order to suffocate all the invading terraformers. The cockroaches begins to die off one by one, and Ichiro faints to the ground as well from the lack of air. At the same time, the Mars rover team sees a large wave coming towards them. It turns out to be a tsunami of terraformers, and they must charge through the enemies in order to escape. Tezuka focuses all his energy into propelling the rover, and they crash into the sea of cockroaches. Luckily, the team manages to break through and land safely on the ground. They continue forwards, but soon sees another tsunami of insects much larger than the one before. Bosako and Maria decides to defend the team from the outside and transforms into insect hybrids while heading towards the wave of terraformers. They try their best to fight off the incoming cockroaches, but the vehicle flips as they exit the horde, throwing the teammates in the air. Everyone inside the car gets knocked out, but the rover goes into autopilot and drives off. The teammates left behind tries fighting off the insects, but gets killed one by one. The rest of the team wakes up only to find themselves at Box 1 already. Komachi tries looking for the other teammates, but the Yakuza thinks that they are the only survivors. They head into the spaceship, while 2 of them stand guard outside. Mina tries running a diagnostic on Box 1, only to see that it's somehow transmitting data towards Earth. The group hears gunshots from the outside and rushes towards their teammates, only to find them lying dead on the ground. Apparently, the terraformers have learned how to use weapons and kill the 2 standing guard with the guns from Box 1. Komachi injects himself with the DNA and transforms into a giant hornet with amazing battle powers. He attacks the cockroaches with devastating blows as he punches holes into their bodies. Jen's mutation turns him into a desert locust that can jump 90 stories in a single leap. He's able to decapitate numerous enemies using his kicks alone. Mina transforms into a praying mantis and slashes the insects into pieces. The team quickly overwhelms the cockroaches and destroys them with little effort. On the other side, Dr. Honda talks to one of the terraformers who's able to speak unlike the others. It goes to Bugs 2 and turns on the oxygen while pointing a gun at the captain who's lying on the floor, exhausted from the fights. Suddenly, the cockroach gets opened up from the inside and Asuka emerges from its body. It turns out that her transformation is based on the Emerald Cockroach Wasp, who has the ability to control the minds of cockroaches and wear their exoskeleton as disguise. Instead of dying from the earlier attacks, she was able to manipulate the insects into killing each other. She quickly dries her face from the sticky white liquids and proceeds to shoot the captain multiple times. Asuka pours water onto Ichiro, whose transformation is the Asian Chironomid. He can survive in almost any condition and only requires water to reactivate his cells. They turn out to be working on a secret mission for the doctor, and Ichiro was the one who sabotaged the flight system on Box 2. The doctor ordered them to bring the eggs from the terraformers back to Earth no matter the cost. Komachi and his team hears the Box 2 engine from afar, and the doctor explains that their plan was never to simply exterminate the cockroaches from Mars. He plans on retrieving more genetic materials from the insects in order to make better hybrid soldiers for the Japanese government, which no doubt will make the country become a superpower. They are put on this planet mostly as test subjects, and their fight with the terraformers are recorded as valuable research data. In fact, they were only able to create the insect hybrids because Bugs 1 was able to retrieve a carcass from the cockroaches. While Ichiro and Asuka plans to take off from Mars, the eggs hatch prematurely and produces 2 evolved terraformers. Asuka charges in and stings them with her claws, trying to control their minds, but their evolution has granted them immunity to her powers, and it proceeds to kill her by punching through her stomach. The spaceship takes off into the air, heading for Earth, while the new terraformers call for help from their brethren. The cockroaches from the ground opens up their wings and flies towards the spaceship, causing it to stall and malfunction while guiding it back onto the planet right beside Bugs 1. The evolved cockroaches surrounds the team with their armies of insects and orders them to attack. Komachi and his team transforms and fights off the enemies with everything they have. They manage to defeat many of the terraformers, but runs into trouble when facing the 2 evolved ones that show amazing battle powers similar to human fighters. Mina tries attacking one of them, but gets her arm ripped off and killed in an instant. Seeing his friend being destroyed like nothing, Jin injects himself with his second dose of mutation, causing the transformation to progress even further, increasing his powers. Komachi injects himself again as well, and the 2 continues to destroy the enemies with their heightened abilities. After killing many of the terraformers with his kicks, Jin jumps into the air and injects himself a 3rd time, causing wings to grow from his back. The army of cockroaches flies towards him and fights him in the air, but they're no match for the human hybrid and gets destroyed into pieces. They continue to fight against the creatures waves after waves and eventually slows down as their fatigue becomes more apparent. Jin understands that they must destroy the leaders and injects himself with multiple doses of mutations, causing his body to spike in power but also making the transformation permanent. He takes this opportunity and attacks the evolved cockroach with a devastating kick and kills him by knocking his head off. Jin falls down soon after as he exhausted all his reserves. Komachi tries to defend him against the remaining leader, but gets defeated easily and gravely wounded. Just when they're about to be finished off, the evolved cockroach notices something from behind and pulls back his attack. A glowy moth-like creature flies towards the insects while dropping sparkles of dust in the air. It turns out that Nana's body has evolved into her final form in order to aid her teammates against the terraformers. She flies towards the cockroaches and continues to drop the glowing dusts. Jin realizes that these are miniature bombs, while the terraformers looks at it with intrigue and confusion. Komachi flies towards Nana, trying to save her from the battle, but Jin tells him that she's been dead a long time ago. One of the cockroaches fires at Nana, which causes a chain reaction of explosions. Jin rushes towards his friend and saves him from the explosions in the last minute, while Komachi cries, seeing the woman he loves buried inside the flames. When everything settles, Komachi wakes up and walks towards his friend, only to see that he's permanently transformed into a locust creature. He tries to comfort Jin and tells him no matter how he looks, he will always be human in the heart. With his last breath, Jin tells his friend to live on for both of them, as tears fall from his eyes. Komachi finds the evolved cockroach still alive and punches him in anger for the destruction that he caused. He plans to finish the terraformer, but eventually decides to end the hatred between men and insects by sparing his life. He goes inside the spaceship only to find Ichiro still alive. The man points a gun at the main character, but saves him by shooting the terraformer behind instead. They decide to cooperate for now and resolve their differences once they get back on Earth. The 2 launches the escape pod into the atmosphere, while the evolved cockroach stops his brothers from chasing after, repaying the debt for sparing his life. Meanwhile, Dr. Honda notices that Ichiro has hacked into their system and is broadcasting the whole event on international television. He decides to hide as the government will surely kill him for his failure and embarrassment. His assistant points her gun at the doctor as she turns out to be a spy from the government. She fires at the doctor, but Honda has planned for this contingency already and proceeds to kill the woman with a deadly poison. On their way home, Ichiro swears that he'll expose the people responsible for this experiment, while Komachi has a strange feeling that they'll come back to this planet in the future. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my video, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time.